Showtime.
Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all-around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Nerdy Occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening.
And I am your host / Time Lord wannabe, the Brainstormer of pop culture. How is everyone doing tonight?
I am not bad. So that's good, I guess.
Yeah. So not much in the way of things that we really considered covering this week. It's gotten quiet again, and I'm very terrified for next week because I feel like there's just going to be this onslaught of things we should cover.
Yep. It usually works that way. If there are a few weeks where it's just kind of slow going, eventually there'll be 1 week where just everything drops, and it'll take us 2 or 3 weeks just to clean it all up.
Mm-hmm. And it isn't even a theme month anymore.
No?
That's next month.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we do have plans for the first week of February.
Also, next month will be our 100th episode.
Yeah, first week of February for that. So we'll get things working on. We're working on that right now to get that ready for you guys. And also, it will be it's February. It'll be a theme month for everyone. So
yeah. Yes,
be ready.
We can honestly say you will love it by the end of the month. But I'm jing.
Wah wah wah. Right. Okay. So yeah. So we had an article that we started last week that took up pretty much the whole time. For like we took 2 hours to cover the first half of it. And we
and that's saying something in particular because lately we've been only going for a few hours doing this.
Yeah. It's kind of good to get back into the swing of things, honestly.
Yeah.
This, but yeah, we're gonna try. Hopefully, we can finish it this week.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this was the Dungeons and Dragons Racial Reckoning is Long Overdue from Wire article from last week. Also, please, if you want, go to Podcast of the Storm number 96 to watch the first half of us covering the first half of this.
Yeah. If you want the full context is there in the other show. So
right. Also, we kind of discussed this last week on the podcast as well. But we will be covering WandaVision when the full series is out. We have heard some things about it, but we want to keep all the full opinions done when it's done.
Because if for no other reason than because I suspect it will be a slow burn, so making judgments about it after only the first 2 episodes is a bit premature. So
that's what I'm getting at with a lot of people talking about it.
a lot of people I've seen that are reviewers say that it should have been released. The first 3 episodes should have been released as like a unit because apparently the mystery proper starts in episode 3, or at least that's what I've heard.
Anyway, yeah, we're gonna wait for so it's probably gonna be at least a month or 2 before we actually review WandaVision.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, this article, it's again, like, it was a very stupid article from last week that we were covering. Like I said, it's from Wire.com. It's the Dungeons and Dragons racial reckoning is long overdue. I forget the author's name of this article. Give me one moment to check. God, I still right. Yeah, this by Mr. Matthew Gault. If I said the name wrong, I'm sorry. This was published December 31st, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're just covering like the next. Yeah. So we're hopefully again like we're trying to finish this today or tonight.
Ah.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I think I blocked a lot of this from my mind over the last week, just because of how stupid it was.
It's healthy to do that sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So
Don't look too long into the abyss, lest the abyss consume you.
So this part of the article is teenage power fantasies left to fester.
That title is already condescending and dismissive and stupid.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, okay, let's start.
Who put you, Matthew, in charge of morally arbitrating what power fantasies A are a thing and B should be?
Yeah. Okay, so I believe Orion Black. We talked about him last week again because of this article. Context wise, I believe, if I remember correctly, he was an intern of sorts with Wizard.
He works for Wizard of the Coast as like a diversity consultant or something, I think.
He was, yeah, but we agreed with him that
he was fired under false and stupid pretenses. Yeah,
because he had pitched ideas to, I believe, his
superior officer or whatever the fuck, and his ideas were yanked.
Yeah, that they were plagiarized from him, and yeah, like that. Then again, like we obviously said that is very wrong, and he does have. I believe we said that he does have actual cause to file a lawsuit.
Yeah,
and granted, this was like what, a year or so ago, or during the summer of 2020.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Ryan, you should sue Wizard of the Coast.
If he had,
regardless of the merits of your ideas or the merits of your position as like the diversity officer or whatever, you should not put up with people stealing your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So fucking sue them.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Orion Black says that working on D&D was like attempting to make changes to a fundamentalist religion.
You mean to say that people care about D&D and therefore don't like people mucking with it, sir?
On a business level, Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins, D&D senior story designer, make all the decisions. They say those two praise this god of D&D, and the image they have of this god is very specific, and they cannot anger this god. Anything they change. Let me finish it.
Okay.
Anything they can change, they have to work through their concept of faith and do some mental gymnastics.
Yes, it's called giving a damn about an art form or a piece of media. And I get what you're getting at, but the thing is, the religious comparison is somewhat disingenuous. it doesn't have to be religious or irrational devotion to say, I like this thing as it is, and any changes that are made to it either need to be equal to what was there originally or an improvement. Because when people attach themselves to things, they get very attached to them, and therefore they like to see good things happen with their favorite IP. That's not irrational or even naive. That's just the desire for quality control. It's a protective instinct. When you like something, generally you don't like seeing it degraded or altered in such a way that compromises the integrity of it. If someone drew a devil mustache on the Mona Lisa tomorrow, I guarantee you would have 1,000 art snobs rioting in the streets, and they would be justified to do so, because you fucking marked up the Mona Lisa, you motherfucker. Well, in the nerd community, Dungeons and Dragons is very much the same way, and if you fuck up D&D, people are gonna respond, "You fucked up D&D, you motherfuckers." That's not irrational or overly devoted. That's just being protective of something you like, which is what people do with things they like. Moving on. Brainstormer?
Sorry, stepped away for a sec. We'll have to step away again, but yeah. All right.
Okay.
Crawford is gay and has fought to make sure men are represented in varied forms in D&D's books. This doesn't interfere with the doctrine of D&D, Black says. It doesn't interfere with the lore, because nothing that exists already has been changed. You're not saying no to anything that existed prior.
Okay. Then I don't really have an opinion one way or the other on this. I think though that this is something that should be left up to the DM more than the actual creators of the game. If you want to have a gay relationship in your D&D game, then so be it. That's really more of a character decision than it is a editorial decision. And I think that might be one of the reasons people are getting pissed off at you, is because you're trying to make things that should be either a character decision or a DM decision into an editorial decision. And one of the benefits of D&D has always been its kind of skeleton key nature, or the fact that it's a jack of all trades, i.e., if you want to do something in D&D, you will find a mechanism to do it in D&D. What you guys appear to be doing is taking things that should be optional and enforcing them as canon, which is not the kind of thing that usually happens in D&D, which might be why people are getting pissed off. And generally speaking, you shouldn't put an identity or a demographic above artistic integrity at all. It doesn't really matter if in this instance you changed anything or not. You're still operating from a fucked framework to begin with. You're putting the non-diegetic identities of the players ahead of storytelling and warping storytelling out of shape in order to do so. Or at least in principle, you would be okay with warping the storytelling out of shape in order to do so. And that also might be something that pisses people off. I know it pisses me off, and I'm freaking bisexual. So yeah, don't pander to demographics and identity groups. Do things that will increase the quality of the storytelling and the world building. That's literally all you're tasked with doing. Leave anything else up to the players and the DMs. Because otherwise you're being authoritarian and declaring things on high like you are in fact the religious people. to call back to Orion's comparison there that I thought was slightly disingenuous, but in this instance is at least somewhat useful to call back to. And while we're waiting for... Okay.
As heating myself up some burgers.
Ah.
Go ahead, you can, I don't know, gag or something. I know you don't like them.
Well, if I outwardly gagged every time I heard about them, I would probably have gotten beaten up by now, because so many people religiously adhere to burgers being delicious, even though I don't like them.
Again, like, you not liking sandwiches or burgers will always be the weirdest thing to me.
And I always find it adorable that of all the obviously weird shit about me, that's the thing you pick out as weird. But it means that you're judging me as a person and not based on outward shit. So I will always be grateful for you doing that. Anyway, moving on before we engage in the supernatural chick flick moment.
No, it's just like everyone likes burgers. I don't like burgers and sandwiches. Like, it's a universal concept. Like you give a sandwich, like a ham sandwich, to a guy in the desert in the Middle East. He will know what it. He'll eat it and like it.
Well, that might be a bad example because there are restrictions in Islam about eating pork, so probably not.
Okay, turkey.
But I get what you're saying.
It's just like like, you were legitimately, like, in all my life, in the 20 years I have lived on this earth, you are the one person that I know that doesn't like sandwiches. Hell, vegans like sandwiches, and they make that stupid soy bullshit. I have my gripes on vegans. Just that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, vegans are often, not always, but often vegetarians that have gone freaking religious about it.
I can tell you a story, but again, that's for another day.
Yeah.
All right. So Black says Perkins and Crawford in the real world are ethical people who know right from wrong. Okay, but okay, so they know. Okay, let me do the, like. There's a quote here. They know that things in D&D, if you take them out of that specific context, are wrong. He says, but because it's inside of D&D, they will not touch it, because in that world, that's the way things are, and it has to be right because it's the deity's world.
Okay, once again, we went over this last time. Part of what D&D is for is archetypical satire. It was designed by a bunch of anthropology and mathematics nerds to be a send-up to tropes within classic medieval literature and or legend. So to take something that was literally supposed to be a send-up to a medieval setting and apply modern, non-diegetic, mind you, moral standards to it is bullshit, no matter why you're doing it. In the same way that in the 90s, when the Christians were railing that D&D was going to turn a bunch of people into Satanists, they were fucking morons.
They said that with rock music too, and
yes,
comics, and
yes, basically anything that can be enjoyed as art unto itself.
Because
they said that about it at some point.
Because they are miserable little pricks.
Yeah, because their morality has no bearing on D&D. Was the universal like reply was the universal reply to those evangelicals and those Christians. Your morality has no bearing here. Please fuck off with it. It's like in the freaking Wizard of Oz. You have no power here. Now be gone before somebody drops a house on you too, and so on. That was basically the response to the moralistic evangelical Christians back in the day. And yet somehow the powers that be at Wizards of the Coast have convinced themselves that this is any different. Well, I'm sorry, my darlings, but as somebody who definitely would tell those people, those evangelicals back in the day to go fuck themselves, I'm going to have to say the same thing to you when you insert your morality into Wizards of the Coast for no goddamn reason. Your morality has no bearing here. Please fuck off with it. You have no power here. Be gone before somebody drops a house on you too, etc.
Yeah.
Please realize that you are not above other people just because your standards are different. The issue is that your standards should not be enforced in this way to begin with. At all. Fuck off, please.
Mm-hmm. One second. Sorry,
Yes.
I was mid eating burger.
You're
So.
eating. Yes.
Yeah, my grandfather grilled some burgers yesterday in the middle of January outside. I mean, granted, it wasn't like super cold or anything, but I don't know, grilling in January. Like,
yeah, it's a little odd.
I think the fact that he's never done it before was the weird part. Anyway.
That is odd.
But nah, you can never beat a grilled burger, like charcoal grilled burger. Don't listen to anyone who says like propane tanks and grilled, like propane grilled burgers. They don't have the same taste, man. They don't.
I obviously don't have an opinion one way or the other because in my opinion they're both fucked. But never mind.
I was more talking to the audience, but no, it's just the char on the burger. It's so good. Like it's juice. Anyway,
I assume it's something similar to the way steaks work, kind of.
I haven't had steak in a while. I probably need. At some point, I'm going to go to like a Roadhouse or something.
And now I'm craving medium rare. Damn it. Well.
Anyway. Black, like Walker, identified the rules and structure of D&D as fundamental to the problem. There is this rule structure that is for this white, cis, shitty guy, a power fantasy that is connected directly to the stereotypes that are a problem. They exist so that this white guy who thinks he's not a jock can look at every race and gender group in their high school, draw them into a character, and go, I rule this world. Okay, fuck you. Like, again, the whole point of D&D is, one, to have fun, and second, it is... Actually, I don't know where I was going with this. Fuck.
Okay. I'm gonna have to have you read that again, just because I'm still processing what the fuck we just even said there.
Okay, give me a sec. All right. Black, like Walker, identify the rules and structure of D&D as fundamental to the problem. There is this rule structure that is for this white, cis, shitty guy, power fantasy that is connected deeply to the stereotypes that are a problem, they say. He says, they exist so that this white guy who thinks he's not a jock can look at every race and gender group in their high school, draw them into a character, and go, I rule this world.
Okay. I there's so much wrong with this.
I mean, for the record, for the longest time, from like the 50s, right?
Yeah.
It was nerds who went into like their parent, and I'm talking like kids and stuff who were the nerds or Poindexters, whatever you called them during the times,
Yeah.
who were ostracized from quote unquote normal society because of them being smarter or different.
Yeah. Socially awkward, isolated, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a way for them to connect with other people like them and hang out and have fun. That wasn't like going to the movies or other things. Again, like I don't know a lot about my history and like how things were for people in those decades.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, D&D was kind of just a way for. It was primarily a nerd thing for a while.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like the major group. I mean, it was technically it was created by nerds.
Yeah. Mathematicians and freaking anthropology and literature majors and shit.
Yeah.
In college, no less.
What have you done with your life?
Hmm?
I was making a joke, like some kids in college made a game that has expanded over like the last what
Yeah, I'm imagining just a bunch of like really nerdy guys got drunk one night and dreamed up D&D, and then here we are 70 years later, and it's still
so,
still going on a trajectory and getting bigger
so
and bigger. It's like the first meme, honestly.
yeah. So D&D has, for one thing, its longevity is due to it being able, like, just people who were the outsiders
Yeah,
so long.
yeah,
Hell,
and
I believe even like some of the nerds who like the first generation and stuff who had kids themselves even used D&D to get closer with their kids. Sometimes, like
yeah,
not all the time,
probably, probably.
but my point being is D&D, like for a lot of things that people say is just for white guys or whatever, it's legitimately just for everyone.
Yeah, it's universal.
Yeah.
Basically, if you can understand the math involved and you have an appreciation for the fantasy genre involved, then D&D is for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it alarming for you to even say or to even conceive that in a world where obviously when D&D was created, segregation was still a thing, and therefore a lot of black people were more likely to be the outcasts. I find it a little bit hard to imagine that you think there was never a time where a black person who had been outcast because, again, in the era of segregation, found solace with some mixed race friends because of D&D. Are you basically assuming there was no, or there were no black nerds back in the day? Because to that I will say the harshest and most concise of fuck yous.
Mm-hmm.
But more to the point, the beginning of this whole clusterfuck of wrong was you saying the rules of D&D are a problem, be- essentially because they won't conform to your arbitrary external moral standards.
Mm-hmm.
To which I say, the rules of D&D outrank your arbitrary external moral standards because your arbitrary external moral standards, once again, have no place in D&D. They have no place in music, they have no place in arts. The purpose of art is to convey non-moralistic, non-subjective value, qualitative value. Not moral value, but qualitative value. It can also contain moral aspects to it, sure. That's where we get morality plays and shit from, but it does not have to. And if you come to a point where your morality impedes your ability to create or expand on art, you need to fuck off with it. When morality gets in the way of art, morality needs to fuck off when you're in the business of making art. And as cerebral and mathematical and frankly kind of spurgy as D&D is, it's still a form of art. It's still a game. It's still something that is meant to be played and to enrich people's lives
Yeah.
with fun and entertainment and shit. So you need to fuck off with your morality as and when you try to make D&D adhere to your morality and you fail because it doesn't belong there. My issue with your statement of the rules of D&D are the problem is it implies that you think that your moral structures, your moral authoritarianism outranks D&D for some reason. And maybe in other areas of life you can make that argument, but when you're tasked with creating D&D, your first and foremost allegiance, sir or madam, is to D&D. When you're tasked with making a thing as a person who is paid to do that job, doing your job comes first. Whatever abstract moral philosophies you want to dabble in your free time is your business, but it has no place in your job. Fuck off. And also, while we're here, this was another thing I wanted to. There's so many things wrong with this. I might be spinning 2 or 3 more off of this, but okay. You essentially just attempted to intuit what the fuck was going on in someone else's brain by making up all this bullshit about the motivations of this hypothetical cis white male nerd that you came up with. And not only is that bullshit because of all the reasons we've already specified, but you essentially, in your rationale, brought back the reasoning why people bullied nerds back in the day. Because nerds were socially awkward. They didn't fit in. They didn't play by the same rules as everybody else in society did. So they were the outcasts. You just created a new rationale for people to bully the shit out of nerds. In a nerd hobby is where you work, sir. In a nerd hobby. No matter how universal D&D might get, no matter how popular D&D might be, because let's face it, the nerds were right all along, and we've almost universally come to this conclusion. It's still part and parcel a nerd hobby. And your reaction to actual legitimate nerds is to conjure up in your own head all of these bastardized motivations that make them an evil person. Not only fuck you, but number one, you never argue a person in an argument when an argument will do. You challenge the context of the argument, the substance of the argument, not the person making it. Number one. Number two, your approach to nerds, being as you work in a nerdy hobby, is like a chef who refuses to let anyone eat. If a chef was like, my food is too good to be eaten by the idiot masses, that chef would be fired before their first reviews came in, because that's literally the opposite of what a chef's job is. Well, when you work in a geek space, sitting there and saying nerds have all these negative views and negative opinions that I project onto them, that should be your cue to go out the door as well. Because you shouldn't hate your own customer base. And even if you do hate your own customer base, you should hate them for shit they actually willingly subscribe to hold to, rather than the straw man motivations that you yourself came up with. And of course, number three, and this is the thing that pisses me off, that same rationale that you just came up with there about why all nerds are secretly closet jocks who just aren't as successful as the actual jocks, that seriously sounded, to me at least, a lot like Frederick Wertham's rationale for why comic books lead to mental illness. This is something that actually was believed by a psychologist back in the day, that because so many people in mental institutions liked comic books must therefore lead to mental illness. Well, you basically did the same thing with D&D just now. You're saying that because so many disgruntled, allegedly straight and allegedly white and allegedly cis people enjoy D&D, it must secretly be catering to some kind of overarching hive mind of white cis maleness. And not to shit on your parade or anything, but as a counterpoint to that, I am bisexual, I am disabled, and I am a religious minority. And Brainstormer is a mixed race person from the inner city, and we both fucking love D&D.
I unfortunately haven't played it. I've been looking to try and play it. I just
we need to get a D&D game together so you can play for the first time at some point.
I do feel like that was necessary to be said.
Yeah, but still, yeah. Also, you should take that personality quiz I sent you.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. I need to look back on that.
Yeah. But even if your appeal to motives and attempt to read people's minds, Mr. Black, was accurate, which it isn't, and also fuck you, there's nothing explicitly straight, white, or male about D&D. What D&D does have is mathematical and literary meritocracy. But white people and straight people and cis people do not have a monopoly on those ideas. And the idea that you have in your head of whiteness is in fact just Western culture and meritocracy, which have nothing to do with the actual racial components of the people who espouse it. They espouse it because, irregardless of the people who hold those ideas are effective. Because ideas, right, don't have any bearing whatsoever on a person's identity. A person's identity does not shape their worldview. Their worldview shapes their identity, simply put. And now we can finally move on, because I'm out of points to say how this is so incomprehensibly stupid.
You realize that was pretty much like the first part of it, right?
I know.
Yeah, okay. And that's what really hasn't changed. They think that even changing the things that are wrong would be an affront to that. That singular thing is so important, even though they continue to drift farther and farther away from that type of thinking. It's weird as hell. No, what's weird as hell is that you are projecting, sir, and that you are legitimately false, but you think you're right.
Yes, and also you're presupposing that the things you think are wrong are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than actually examining or elaborating on what you think is wrong with D&D and allowing people to actually counter-argue with you, you presuppose that you know what's wrong, and that any reaction to you trying to fix, in air quotes, what's broken is a reaction to trying to keep that wrong thing in place. When in actuality, what you should assume is people have a different worldview from you. And you should actually listen to them and their explanation and their rationales, rather than assuming, as you did in the previous section, that you know what's going on in their heads better than they do. Because even if you did, you would still have to demonstrate that it was accurate. You would still have to demonstrate that it was correct. You cannot just presuppose people or things because something valid or invalid. Validity and invalidity are a byproduct of rationality and substance. They do not preordain it. You can't just write off a rational disagreement because this person is invalid, therefore I don't have to listen to them. And you can't just hyperinflate your own worldview because well, this is clearly valid, so I don't have to explain myself or justify my actions in any way. And also, even if a person agreed with your moral framework, they could still disagree with how you go about it, because how you go about it is more indicative of what you're doing to the thing rather than why you're doing it. Why you engage in an action is nowhere near as important in a lot of cases as the action itself. So, in a lot of cases, it might not even necessarily be that they disagree with your framework, but they disagree with how you are going about presenting it or going about acting on it. Or both. Someone might disagree with your moral framework and they might disagree with how you are carrying it out. But that is not tantamount to defending something that you've already presupposed is wrong. That is tantamount to having a different understanding and a different framework. But you can't conceive of anyone having a different framework from you because your framework in your own mind is so sacrosanct that it could never possibly be questioned. Well, unfortunately, rational human beings question things they find to be irrational. And that might, just maybe, include shit that you think is sacrosanct. Deal with it. Called being self-aware. Please learn it. Moving on.
Alright, for people who love D&D but wanted to change, promises to look at the alignment system and rework evil races often feel like one step forward and two steps back. The issue is complicated and fraught. It's tied into a history of racial stereotypes and nerd power fantasies.
And again, why the fuck do you people who work in geek spaces, hate geekdom so much? Why? I demand an answer to this shit. It baffles me to no end that you don't want geeks to feel powerful, considering that one of the narratives we're always sold on geeks is how powerless they at one point were. Well, if you believe that the history of geeks involves them being disempowered, then surely them gaining power is a good thing. Especially because, and your interest in these hobbies indicates this, when geeks were mocked and shamed for liking the things they liked, and they said, I'll show you guys how awesome this is one day, for all intents and purposes, and by all indications, they were right. D&D is becoming more popular because the people who originally liked D&D had a point. Comics are becoming more popular and comic book based media are becoming more popular because the people who like comics had a point. And you know, the various science fiction and fantasy franchises are becoming more popular because the people who defended those had a point. And yet, even though we can all universally agree that these people had a point, you still, for some reason, want them to be seen as invalid and up their own ass and privileged and everything else. Which is it? Are they right because they were in on something that other people weren't in on for most of the 20th century? Or are they invalid people and therefore we should change everything about their hobbies? You can't have it both ways. Either these things are worthwhile enough to keep, in which case we should at least assume no more corruption and no less corruption among nerd communities than anyone else, or these people were always wrong and therefore we should not be enjoying their hobbies as much as we do. Or I suppose there is the third option of this hobby you have here, this IP would be great if we just change everything about it, which makes no coherent sense because generally when you like something, you like it as it is rather than for what it could be. And when you like something only for what it could be, that's honestly kind of abusive. And if you think I'm exaggerating there, let me provide you with an example. Let's say you're in a romantic relationship with somebody, but the only But anytime they ask you to tell them something positive about themselves, you tell them something about what they could be or what they could do with their lives rather than what they actually do or what they are like. If you're in a relationship with somebody and all you can think to do with that person is change everything about them, that is you being an abusive cunt who is more in love with the idea of a thing than the thing itself. Well, the same is true of IPs and art. If the only thing that you can think that's positive about a piece of art is everything you want to change about that piece of art, then you don't actually like the art at all. You only like what it can be as a means to an end, which is going to put you at odds with people who like these things as an end in themselves. If a person likes the thing as it is, and you come in saying, I can make this better by changing everything about it, you're going to get some pushback because people like things the way they are. And your suggestions have been considered and rejected, which is the other thing. These kinds of people always like to assume that the reason why other people don't like their ideas is because they're invalid and uneducated and they have all these negative motives and shit. But did it ever occur to you that you presented your ideas and that people dislike those ideas on their merits? Did it ever occur to you that you could be wrong or that your ideas could be bad and that people could have valid, rational counter arguments to your position? No, it didn't. That's why you feel the need to conjure up all these negative motives all the fucking time. Because no one could possibly disagree with me. I have the obvious truth. Derp. And incidentally, every idiot on earth thinks they have the obvious truth. In fact, one of the markers for intelligence is the ability to doubt oneself. It goes all the way back to fucking Socrates. The statement, all that I know is that I know nothing. Because stupid people seem to really, really be convinced that everything they need to know, they already know. Intelligent people know that the world is vast enough to contradict them, and therefore they have this thing called self-awareness, which leads occasionally to self-doubt, which leads to gaining more information than the person previously had. But you are utterly unwilling to do so because you think you're the only valid person in existence, and everyone else or everyone that disagrees with you must therefore be invalid. Because you can't conceive of someone knowing something or having a point that you haven't already considered. You fuckers. Moving on.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm not stupid, so.
You're just now realizing that.
I have my doubts sometimes.
Which is healthy, but also as a friend, I should tell you that you're not stupid.
I was also trying to make a joke, and I think it just fell flat. But okay, whatever.
Uh-huh. Moving on.
But the conversions are happening, and the change is often led by the community. I think more thought needs to be put into how we communicate the behavior of monsters, races in, well, not air quotes, just two single, races and more, Kwan says. Belief systems and cultures are complex, as are the behavior of creatures in nature. While I welcome the effort that Wizards is making, I think it's also important for them to introduce new ways of characterizing the entities that players encounter in their stories.
Okay, once again, this is yet another case of putting non-diegetic moral standards in diegetically and then being surprised when there's a backlash. But the author said something that was kind of interesting here that I feel it's important to point out. They said that cultures are complex, and yet every instance like this where somebody comes into a geek culture hobby and decides to meddle with everything that makes that thing, they seem to want to believe that geek culture or nerd culture is not complicated or worth preserving in any way. That they'll say that about literally every other kind of culture or subculture you can imagine, But when it comes to geek culture is just something that can be appropriated to a means, or as a means to an end. And incidentally, fuck you. If you believe that cultures are complicated and therefore should be respected, then why does that standard never apply to geek culture? Why do you feel you can come into geek culture, actively hate the people that already exist within that culture, and yet feel the need to morally arbitrate over it and change things that ought not be changed according to the people within that culture? That's my question. If you're so worried about cultural appropriation and cultural respect and cultural this and cultural that, why is it the one culture you never seem to be capable of even realizing that you should respect is the culture that you are currently colonially occupying, like fucking 19th century explorers? You people get mad at exploration and colonialization and everything and appropriation, but you don't realize, or you don't want, or you don't have the capability of realizing that you are culturally occupying geek spaces, and the geeks are unsurprisingly kind of pissed off with you for that. In the same way that I imagine the tribal Africans were kind of pissed off at the English about 2 centuries ago.
5. Well, no, about 3.5 centuries.
Well, but point being, if you're so mad about cultural appropriation and colonialism, then stop colonizing my culture, you bigots. Because I am a nerd, and I would prefer if nerd culture remained unscathed by all of your um Frankfurtian school gobbledygook.
Oh,
You can't
okay.
just go changing a culture willy-nilly, you say.
Mhm.
So I agree with that statement. So stop fucking changing everything about mine. Because my culture is no more a means to an end than any other culture is. Please get that through your head. Moving on.
Bad City stuff. The best way to let go is to be weird. Weird people don't care what other people think about them. Weird people end up being the happy and most creative people. They don't care about fitting in. Stay weird and be weird.
Agreed.
Hello, right here.
I would, yeah, I would drink to that, but I don't have anything to drink at the moment, so I can't.
I do, so I shall drink to that.
Mm.
I'll take a sip for Dalton.
Ah.
I mean, you don't have anything on here right now, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Okay. All right. The loudest voices criticizing D&D right now are doing it out of love. They don't want to see it destroyed, and they want it to change with the times. Okay.
Okay. Again, I've already kind of made this point, but okay. If you claim to love a person, and yet all you want to do is change them and change how they look at things and change how they act and change how they dress and change this, change that, change everything else. Hmm?
No, please finish your thought. Then I'll.
Yeah. But okay. I already kind of made this point, and I fucked up making the point previously, but I'm glad it actually came back to being applicable here. If we were talking about two human beings in a relationship, and the only positive things one person in the relationship could say about the other is all the shit that that person needs to change, or how good they would be if they did this thing, that thing, and the other thing, then it's very obvious to most people looking at that relationship from the outside that one person in that relationship doesn't actually love the other. What they love is the abstract idea of that person. They don't love the person themselves for who and what they are. They love what that person can be as a means to an end, or as a means to gratifying their own personal ideal. Well, in the same way, if you enter a geek space claiming to want to change and alter it out of love, but the only things you can say that are positive about it are either very, very superficial or the things you want to change, then in the same way, it's very obvious to everyone looking from the outside in and from the inside out in many cases that you don't love geek culture, you don't love D&D, you don't love comics, you don't love this, that, or the other. What you love is what you wish these things were. But unfortunately, the person you're in the relationship with is a person unto themselves. And the idea that you have of them, the wish fulfillment idea you have of them, is not that person. And likewise, geek spaces as they are not your ideal. So do not claim to love something if all you can think to love about that thing is changes you want to make to it. Because that's not love, that is abusively using a thing as a means to an end. And if it were a human being, we would notice that that is a bad thing. And in the case of art, I think we should also acknowledge that that's a bad thing.
Right. So I'm in the middle of this kind of. I mean, like for changing it for very stupid reasons is obviously wrong.
Yeah, I'm not saying there should never be any changes. I'm just saying if the only things you can think of to like about a thing are the changes you want to make to it, whether it's a person or whether it's an art form, then you don't actually love the thing.
Yeah.
If you want to make constructive changes, then that's something completely different.
Yeah. However, I do think here that is not the case. Obviously.
Yeah.
I do think if you were thinking maybe changing maybe like how the system works, like to make it more accessible to get more people in.
Yeah. If you wanted to make it easier to play or provide more world building or this, that, or the other, that would be one thing. But
that makes sense.
It's not like that though. To once again go back to my human romantic relationship analogy, it'd be like if you were a fundamentalist Christian and you got in a relationship with somebody, and every time they did something that fundamentalist Christianity didn't approve of, you beat the shit out of them.
Okay, that took a turn.
That's the equivalent of this. It's conform to my morality or you're a terrible person and I will leave you, basically. Well, that's their approach to D&D. It's conform to my morality or you're toxic and you enable white supremacy and this, that, and the other, and the abstract concept of whiteness, which is also the devil.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I agree. So Bat City Stuff says, I never played Dungeons and Dragons before. I think it's too late for me to start because I don't know anyone that would be willing to let me play or teach me.
Dude, it's number one, never too late to start playing D&D. Number two, Brainstormer hasn't played either, and we were just talking about how we should definitely do a game so that he has a chance to play for the first time. So if you want to learn how to play, you should message one of us on Twitter, and we'll see about actually forming a game of D&D.
Yeah, we also have a Discord to get in contact with us there as well. There's a link down below.
Yeah. So yeah, join the Discord and we can start planning to set up a game of D&D.
Yeah. All right. All right. All right. If what I say has any impact on changing the things that I fought so hard for, that got ignored or pushed aside, if that can go away just a little bit, it'll be worth it, Black says. Walker thinks D&D is an important entry point for tabletop role-playing, but hopes it will push people to seek out other forms. D&D crossed over, but role-playing games didn't, he said. The space is incredibly vibrant right now, and it's better than it's ever been. To its credit, part of that is that D&D is a great entryway into the hobby for many people. I just wish more people looked outside of it to see what the solutions for those problems were.
Again, the issue I take with this is it's using D&D as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. You literally just admitted you hope that people get into D&D so that they will eventually seek out other shit. Which to say nothing else, is not very loving towards D&D. Like, I like getting my friends into D&D, but I don't like getting my friends into D&D because I'm hoping they'll engage in some other thing, or it'll be some kind of stepping stone or means to an end. I want I want to share D&D with my friends because I love D&D, and I think my friends will get enjoyment out of D&D. You see how that's a very different perspective, a very different worldview. Your approach is I want people to get into D&D so that they will then get into this other thing. My approach is I want people to get into D&D because D&D itself has worth, has value, has merit. And there exactly in lies the difference between the people who write this article and myself. I assume that the things I like have value in and of themselves. They can only see these things as a means to an end. And that is why they fuck up being stewards of these things so fucking hard. Because if the only value you see in something is as a means to an end, that's basically an admission that you see no value in it in and of itself, which is a very wrong-headed way of approaching things that you're supposed to enjoy. You're supposed to enjoy things for themselves on their own terms, not because of what they can do or be in some kind of grander scheme or grander framework. It's the difference between loving someone and using them, to call back to my metaphor. When you try to change a person for your own selfish gratification, that is abuse. Well, when you try to change art for your own selfish gratification, that is also abuse. Moving on.
Well, that's the stuff in my a quote. In my opinion, the existence of romantic relationships are a highly overrated phenomenon. Dr. Manhattan.
Well, I have to disagree with Dr. Manhattan on this one. We evolved as a species to find the desire of others desirable. So I think to say that romantic relationships are overrated is kind of spit in the eye of evolution, and I'm not in the habit of doing that.
And also, he says, how many players are needed minimum to play Dungeons and Dragons?
Minimum.
I assume 6, because I believe the party is usually 5.
Okay, you can have a smart. I would say probably about 4, because you can have a fairly small party of just like 3 players. But generally speaking, I prefer if a party is between 5 and 6 players.
Okay.
Anything over like 6 or 7 players and things get overcomplicated.
Alright, let us finish this fucking thing.
Yes, dear gods, this has taken forever.
Almost done. Wizards of the Coast declined to provide any comment on this story and pointed me to its blog post on the subject. Okay, well, I guess that's the end.
Oh, thank God.
Give us one moment while the other article is loading. But yeah, I don't know what to really feel with that article. I mean, like, it is stupid, but I don't know. Like, it's just so. It's kind of a. It's similar to other articles we've covered in the past. Like, it runs on for too long.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the whole meeting and argument and discussion is kind of lost in there because of the length.
Yeah, because the author really likes hearing themselves talk, and so they repeat different variations on the same point over and over, which then requires anyone rebutting it to repeat the same point over and over in various different ways.
Right. Bad City stuff. if I only have one other friend besides me, would me and my friend be enough to play the game?
Um, probably not. Because somebody's got to be the DM, got to be the dungeon master, and then you've got to unless of course your friend is willing to play multiple roles. Like if your friend is willing to be the DM and also um has different has different NPCs as like the other members of your party, that could work. But I'm not sure how like logistically like stable that is.
Still loading.
Uh-huh.
So we're not looking for. It's gonna be a while before we even do a D&D thing, honestly.
Yeah.
If anything, that might be a special we do at some point in the future. Not entirely sure when, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It'll take some doing, but
yeah.
I remember the first time I played D&D. It was in college, and we went on during we did a session for 13 and a half hours.
Nerds.
Yes.
Yeah. So Bad City Stuff says so 3 minimum.
Probably. Um Probably. Three or four is probably the ideal size if you're just starting out.
Okay, so it's loaded now. Okay, so we got on to the second one. This was an article that I picked. This is kind of like something that's I picked it for myself because, well, you'll see. Okay, so this is from GamesRadar.com. So Rooster Teeth hit Ruby crossing over with the Just League. It's by Chris Aaron. This was published 2 days ago. It's introducing an all-new version of Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman. So okay, full
Disclosure.
yeah, full disclosure. Like I said, I picked this for myself because at one point I was a huge fan of Ruby back in like 2016, which would have been its third season. It's on like season 8 now.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, it kind of lost some traction after the third season, mainly due in part to the death of the original creator, Monty Oum. Bad City Stuff. If I only have one other friend besides me, would me and my friend be enough to play the game?
He asked that already, I thought.
Oh, okay. I scrolled up by accident.
Okay. I was gonna say because I remember answering that question.
That's my bad. That's my bad. But yeah, I picked this because I think it's interesting. Like I said, this article I picked it because I thought it was interesting. Because, well, for one thing, apparently Ruby also had comics made from DC. I haven't read them. I've heard varying things about them, mainly not good things. But yeah, I stopped watching Ruby like after the 4th season because, well, various reasons actually. Not only because it kind of went down in quality in terms of like writing and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
they the animation engine because it's like a 3D animated show.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't look good. And they've had 4 years to master it and still doesn't look great. Um, Not to mention, like, the writers and, like, some of the cast are just kind of jackasses to the fandom,
Ah.
the fans. And the
Yeah.
fandom itself, um, it got taken over by the shippers
Uh-huh.
and the Tumblr rights.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the writers like to pander to those jackasses. Anyway, before again,
Joy.
yeah, Bat City stuff. Is there a way to play over the internet? I believe so.
Yes. It's really actually very easy, especially if you use Discord voice chat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have internet friends, then yeah, it becomes easy to play.
Yeah. But I also feel like I should give a description on what Ruby is about. So it is set in a fantasy world that's based on like fables and stories, and it's also like very heavily anime inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, if anything, just watch like the first 3 seasons because I would say that's the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Other than that, I got nothing else. But yeah, like I said, this article or like this story about like Justice League and Ruby crossing over. Bad Say Stuff asks, "Do I need to buy anything or free?"
You probably are going to want some multi-sided dice. But you can actually there are dice replicating programs that you can download on your computer if you want to.
Hmm. Yeah. But I thought this was an interesting concept because like it's combining Ruby with DC comics, specifically Justice League, obviously. But it's like supposed to be the Justice League of the world of Ruby, which I find kind of weird because that makes no sense. I get multiverse and all, but
Mm-hmm.
I still it's weird to think about because a lot of really the only character that makes sense is Wonder Woman because she has
Yeah,
that kind of fantasy setting already working for her.
yeah.
Anyway, enough rambling. Okay, so DC has released 7 character designs of the Justice League members, reimagined for Rooster Teeth's Ruby universe, known as Remnant, as part of the digital first Ruby / Justice League crossover series. Oh, it's going to be digital. I didn't know that.
Hmm.
Okay, so we have the first picture of Batman. And he's a bat faunus. Oh, right. So there's a species of creature called the faunus, which are basically humans with animal features.
Ah,
Originally, it was kind of like the plot point was kind of faunus civil rights in the story,
ah,
but unfortunately, in after season 3, it became more of BLM,
huh.
and it wasn't handled in a good way at all. It was just
So, like, are we talking Coral with the equalist levels of fucking cringe,
uh,
or, or worse?
it probably worse.
Oh God.
I mean, they abandoned it after, I believe, after season 5. Season 5 is like
Uh-huh.
dog shit, by the way. Just
Hmm. But at the very least, there being animal character or animal human hybrid characters in this universe means that there can actually be a literal Batman.
yeah. I will say it looks very much like a lot of the art, like concept art they do for Ruby, which I think is neat. However, I don't think the story of Bruce Wayne really makes sense because there's already like a ninja character in like the main cast of Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, that is a total shit character, but the thing about Faunus is they're kind of always on the bottom of the food chain, essentially.
Uh-huh.
And Bruce Wayne, is rich and
Billionaire.
yeah. So I don't know how that would work, essentially. Okay. Moving on to the next image. Green Lantern.
Oh, so they are doing more than just the Trinity.
Yeah, it looks like Jessica Cruz Green Lantern, I believe.
Wouldn't have been my choice, but given that they're pandering to Tumblr rights, that makes sense.
Ironically, she looks pretty good. That's a good costume, actually. I don't dislike it. Again, like I just wonder how a lot of the DC stuff works in that world because again, it just doesn't really make sense to me.
My question with the Green Lantern is: are they gonna go more of a sci-fi route with them, or are they gonna make their powers magic based?
Good question. I got nothing really to say. I mean, it looks good. This one, they Cyborg. I'll be honest, it doesn't look that great.
No, although he does look cute.
I got nothing for that. Like again, Ruby is very anime inspired.
Mm-hmm.
So I get what they're going for, and there is a character who is a cyborg himself.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't think it translates well to the world. Again, that's just my opinions, and I'm curious to see how they do.
Mm-hmm.
Superman, huh?
That doesn't look bad.
It's very anime. Not gonna lie.
Though if they were going to go full anime, I wish they had made him built like a JoJo's character. Because I mean, if we're in anime territory anyway,
Yeah. I wish the cape was longer though. That's just me.
yeah, they kind of gave him almost a Shazam style like half cape.
Yeah. The whole chest, the crest thing is weird to me, but again, that probably just me.
Mm.
It's just like you can't really see the S is the thing.
Uh-huh.
Maybe like throw in like a red outline or something would have been better.
They might tweak it before it gets to print those. So who knows?
Fair.
The Flash looks stupid.
Yeah, no, it's like if it was Jay Garrick, maybe it would look better. But I think
But
this is Barry Allen, so
yeah, or they might even be trying to go for Wally.
I like he has blonde hair, so
Yeah, it. Yeah, ironically, I think we found a version of the Flash who Ezra Miller is actually more flashy than.
to be fair, they don't really do good at explain. Like their world building is kind of shit. So what the character looks like never really has proper like cultures, like different cultures. Like
Hmm. I can see why you felt the need to fix this in Saga of Fable.
yeah, Aquaman. Oh, it looks like he's a fish faunus.
Well, that does at least make sense.
Again, like it's fine. I'm just like it looks like Aquaman. I don't get the pink, like the purple streak in his hair though. But whatever. They always do weird things with colors in the show. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah. Again, like I got no.
Maybe because purple and green contrast really well.
He also, I think he also apparently has purple eyes. So
Yeah.
yeah, Wonder Woman. I
As
don't. I like it actually. I kind
yeah,
of.
as predicted, she's the one that comes off the best in this.
Yeah. I do think the armor on the legs and the it might be a little too much actually. Like it overly designed. You know.
Yeah, but given some of the other ones, I'd rather they over design than under.
Yeah. I remember someone saying that she looked like kind of like the villain of the series as well. Um, who is actually like an evil version of Cinderella. Yeah, Cinderfall it would be her name, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, she looks good. I am very curious on like certain design elements, like the star and the moon on her boots.
Hmm.
But like the silver chainmail kind of armor on her arms and legs, I think is a bit much. And I don't know, like this is me as like someone who has done designing in the past as like a hobby.
Mhm.
Because believe it or not, folks, before I ever became like a writer, I actually wanted to be an artist, like for comics, instead of writing them.
Mhm.
But I realized I wasn't as good as an artist I thought I was when I was growing up, so I kind of gave that up. But I still have that kind of eye for design.
Mhm.
So again, like it's not bad, and I do like how they've incorporated like a phoenix design into the armor as well.
Mhm.
So that's cool. I'm just curious on how these handle these characters and how they are to be in the actual story.
Mhm.
That's what got me curious. The Heroes of Rooster Teeth animated series RWBY are teaming up with some of the most popular heroes ever, the Justice League, in a digital first event book from DC revealed and just released DC April 2021 solicitations. Picking up from the 2019-2020 RWBY limited series from DC. Oh, right. So, huh. That's interesting. I will have to look up to see. I might not buy the series, but I might look it up just out of curiosity.
Hmm.
RWBY's Justice League will feature an all new version of Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman that are residents of RWBY's universe, known as the Remnant. That's what they're called.
Apparently.
Well, the thing is, the world is called Remnant.
Well, maybe they're referring to the world though. The world known as the Remnant.
Hmm. That's pretty cool because the world of Remnant, has it like a shattered moon,
Yeah.
which is very cool. I mean, they explained it recently on how it was shattered, which is it's a lackluster. Like another thing I kind of dislike about RWBY is they have these epic setups, but
And no payoff.
not lackluster payoffs. Even if they
Hmm.
do pay it off, it's lackluster. Like it's just like
Oh, okay. So it's a once upon a time kind of situation.
I believe so. I don't
Hmm.
again. Anyway, the DC
That
universe.
that was always my biggest complaint with Once Upon a Time was they were really good at setting shit up and they were really good at endings, but everything in the middle was a complete crapshoot.
Mhm. All right, so the DC universe and the world of RWBY collide in this new miniseries. Discover the Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, and Diana Prince of Remnant as Team RWBY comes face to face with new versions of DC's Paragons of Justice. The thing is, I don't know if their names would be the same because, if I remember correctly, Monty always had this thing with like creating characters, which is have a have the names mean a color.
Hmm.
Like you have Ruby Rose, Weiss Schnee, which is white snow in German,
Yeah.
Blake Belladonna, and Yang Xiaolong,
Hmm.
like as the main characters. So I'm just curious if they're going to stick with that with these characters or not. So I'm just curious on how they're gonna make it work because I think it could. I think it could. Unfortunately, like how I remember, like again, I'm not really holding out hope for a few reasons.
Uh-huh.
I realize I'm more invested in this than you are, Dalton, but
No, no, it's fine. There have been plenty of times where we've covered stuff just for my personal vendettas, so I'm fine letting you do yours.
right, right. Thank you for indulging my ranting.
It it's honestly nice to see you rant sometimes because you don't usually
Well,
get quite as sparked off as I do.
there are very few things, and like I saw Ruby when it was first coming out, like in 2013. I was in middle school, and it was awesome. And just to see where it's kind of
Mhm.
gone and kind of fallen and become this kind of shit now, and this toxic community of fans. And I don't like using the word toxic.
Uh-huh.
I feel like it's needed in this.
Yeah, yeah.
And seeing that it's also with like Just League, and you know how much I kind of like Just League because of the projects I'm doing involving them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so this has me curious, and I'm also worried that they're going to fuck it up. Now, granted, this isn't obviously canon, but uh, it's just like one of those things that makes you curious. It's like a car crash, essentially. Like you don't want to look, but you can't not look.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
realize
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty morbid example, but I think
No,
it's
no,
it.
I get it though. I definitely get it. I've had plenty of franchises before where I'm like, it would be really awesome if this and this happened, and then it kind of happens, and then it's like, well,
Right. And
yes, no, kind of. Crisis on Infinite Earth was kind of like that for me. There was a lot of stuff in Crisis on Infinite Earth, when the Berlanti verse did it, um, that I liked, like My Kingdom for whatever happened between Constantine and Lucifer that he owed him the favor for. Like, seriously. But at the same time, why did Smallville's Clark can't age like a motherfucker? Why did Kevin Conroy's Batman get one-shotted into a fucking electrical tank?
um,
Um,
well,
d-
The Smallville Clark Kent took away his powers. Also, it's technically been like what
yeah,
2010, so 29,
yeah,
20.
and again, my question is why was that even a thing? Like,
I don't know. If you
I guess I get it that actors do age and shit, but like Tom Welling could have gotten back in shape in time. It didn't have to be as awful as it was.
if you guys do want a better version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, if you think the original was kind of lackluster, I made a rewrite video on my channel, Brainstorm with Pop Culture.
Aha.
And there's that plug. Anyway,
Yeah, and I didn't intend to set him up for a plug, but it just kind of happened that way.
no rehearsal, no planning, none whatsoever.
Yeah, wait. This is this is what we do. You get us unfiltered, folks.
Yeah. But okay, so reads DC's solicitation for Ruby Justice League #1. A new Grimm. Oh, right. Grimm, or the creatures of Grimm, which obviously are reference to the Brothers Grimm,
Yeah.
are these monsters that are basically that kill anything that is life, namely humans. They suck in the show. Like they're not a threat at all.
Oh
They're
no.
fodder. Even though they're treated as like this big, overwhelming, destructive evil force.
So they are to the Ruby universe what putties are to the Power Rangers.
Are we talking show or comics? Because
Well, I was talking the show.
yeah, well, yeah, show, obviously. I think the
Yeah.
comics make them more threatening. It's been a while since I've looked into the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comics.
Uh-huh. And I realize there are other different kinds of foot soldiers in the Power Rangers mythos. Like I could have gone with the Kelzacs or the Tyrannodrones or whatever, but the Putties is the one that everyone knows, so that's the one I went with.
Yeah. Okay. A running ramp is running rampant around the island of Patch, and Ruby and Yang must team up with a young farm boy, Superman, to stop it. Meanwhile, Blake meets a mysterious woman who's appeared on Menagerie, but what is her purpose? And why does she act like she hasn't been around modern society?
Okay, are they gonna explain their powers at any point? Because I feel like that's gonna need some explaining.
I mean, they don't even explain their own power, like their own magic power system in Ruby. So,
Like
I
you
mean, they try, but again, like they kind of just suck at it.
you know how particular I am when it comes to magic systems, and that just that
All these things
to not even bother is annoying to me.
tried in the early seasons, but they're doing like so. There's so many retcons after Monty passed that
Okay, yeah.
it's made it confusing. Because okay, these things called semblances, which are basically supposed to be like powers manifested from a person's personality and soul.
Uh-huh.
That's it.
Okay. I
I think they were going with a very light magic system.
okay.
So, which it's an anime, and most animes do.
Yeah,
Like,
but usually there's at least some kind of deference to some surrogate for like the life energy, chi, etc. Like,
they call it aura.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
I got. I guess I can abide that.
that's my fault. That's my fault. I didn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, but like they basically have the people that are called hunters and huntsmen, who are basically like the ones who fight creatures of Grimm.
Mhm.
They manifest aura, which is like theorized to be the the power of one's soul or the manifestation
Okay,
of soul.
that's fair. That's
Yeah.
well done, actually.
Yeah.
Fine.
Then they fucked it up with retcons again. Like,
Oh God.
but yeah, since they didn't mention Weiss, which is like the hold on, there's a picture here, like for the cover. Okay, let me give me a second. Okay, there we go. Right, yeah, that's like I believe the first cover for the first issue.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the white one at the top. Since yeah, well, okay. She comes from a place called Atlas, which is like high society essentially. Like it's a high society place.
Hmm.
Yeah. So they're still going to keep Bruce as he is, even though he's like a bat faunus.
Hmm.
But there, faunus racism is a huge thing.
Ah.
Yeah. I can't believe they dropped that storyline, honestly, because you could do interesting things with it.
Granted, if they had kept it, they probably would have just driven it straight into social justice territory. So maybe it's better they kept
But
it.
I don't know, like again, like I said, like I think the quality really started to dip after the passing of
Yeah,
uh, the original creator, which
that
happened.
that, that makes sense. I mean, imagine what would have happened if Guillermo del Toro had died halfway through Tales of Arcadia. I don't even want to conceive of that universe. In fact, I'm mentally imagining a universe to crash into that universe because it shouldn't exist.
I am visually strangling your image right now.
I I didn't mean to put that image in your head. let's imagine a universe together that trashes into that universe and destroys it.
Okay, done. But yeah, I'm mildly curious about.
Hmm.
Yeah, like I said, I'm mildly curious about this crossover. If anything, when it comes out, I might do a review of it on my actual channel because I haven't done a comic review in years.
Yeah.
So, um, okay, well, let me pull this up. So, pull it back up real quick because it's like one last thing to read.
Mm.
Uh,
Is my image lagging, by the way? Because it's looking like it's lagging on my end, but it doesn't.
uh,
Um,
to me, you look good. Um,
okay, that's fine. I couldn't tell if it was just my Wi-Fi being dumb again.
but I also want to say, like, I always wanted to see the DC characters in like anime form because they did the manga verse in Marvel,
Yeah,
which makes sense. Like manga is just as much. So I mean, even now, like it's kind of overtaking U.S. comics these days, obviously.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure they actually did do a Marvel anime at one point in Japan because I remember seeing a clip of Doctor Strange fighting Loki that was
Oh yeah,
anime.
they did. Actually, there have been a few, if I remember correctly.
Hmm.
Yeah, but combining it with Ruby is always it just seems like a weird decision to me, and it could be because like Rooster Teeth kind of wants to get some money back because of like the kind of drop I think it's had recently. Like we had a conversation prior to
Yeah.
stream,
If
so
if if you if you were going to combine the DC universe with anime, I would have gone with maybe Dragon Ball because every Superman fanboy and Goku fanboy in existence has always they've always wanted to know the answer to the question of what would happen if Goku and Superman fought.
yeah. Honestly, and this is just me, like being the superhero fan I am.
Yeah,
Combine DC with My Hero Academia, which is it's a superhero manga, and it takes a lot of inspiration from DC, Marvel, and other stuff as well.
yeah.
Like even
Um, Personally, if we were gonna stick them in an anime universe, I'd want to stick them in JoJo's just to get the full effect of animeizing them together.
that would be
Uh,
pretty interesting, actually. I'm not gonna lie.
as far as my stance on the whole Goku versus Superman thing, um, I think it's fairly obvious that Goku would win because he uses ki attacks, and ki is life energy, which is the substance of magic in the DC universe. Therefore, being a Superman is vulnerable to magic, the second Goku pulls out a Kamehameha wave, Superman is dead because it's a giant magical explosion thing,
I
and
okay as
he responds to magic like a normal human. Therefore, it'd
okay
be one normal human versus a Kamehameha wave.
as a Superman fan, I have to say I do not care about the whole Goku versus Superman thing because it's kind of gone wild over the last few years, like just the
Hmm.
stuff. And also, I think logically they wouldn't really fight to the death. It'd be more like sparring than anything. Like,
Yeah, there's always been that's always been the problem I've had with a lot of those versus ideas. Like these characters wouldn't fight each other; they would team up.
yeah, and if they did fight again, like it'd just be friendly sparring.
Yeah,
Like Goku is, even though like he cares about fighting a lot, he is a protector. He's technically a
yeah.
superhero in Dragon Ball.
He's a cinnamon roll, basically.
Yeah,
Goku is the cinnamonist of the cinnamon roll.
yeah, not too bright. Well,
No.
yeah. Well, not he's not too bright in terms of social interactions, but he's a brilliant fighter,
Hmm.
strategist. Anyway, completely off topic. Actually, funny enough, there's actually like a YouTuber who's done like a complete series of like swapping Goku out for Superman in the DC universe. Dragon Ball DC. Like you look it up on YouTube. It's an amazing series. Like it's really cool and interesting, honestly.
Hmm.
I think I sent something to you a long time ago, Don.
You did, I think.
I think it was almost a year ago, actually.
That's weird. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. But yeah, okay. So Marguerite Bennett, if I said the name wrong, I'm sorry. Wrote the 2019 Ruby Limited series DC published. Returns here with artist Aniki. Again, name. If I said the name wrong, I'm sorry. Working alongside her. Bennett's Ruby artist Mirka Andolfo has segued over to draw covers for the 7-issue event. It's not a bad cover, actually. I like it. This is part of the broader partnership with DC, Rooster Teeth and DC's parent company, Warner Media. DC has also produced a comic book series based on another Rooster Teeth cartoon, Genlock. Yeah, honestly, that series kind of just fell to the wayside. Like, it was supposed to be a mecha anime. From what I've gathered, it didn't do well because it was just not greatly written, similar to Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Ruby Justice League debuts as weekly digital first on Tuesday, March 9th, with new chapters released every week. Okay, well, apparently I can't buy fucking physical issues, which I like buying, but yeah, Ruby Justice League will also be released in print as a monthly 7-issue series launching April 22nd. Okay, well, never mind. I retract my previous statement. Each print issue will contain 2 digital chapters. That doesn't make any sense. Why would there be more chapters digitally than in physical?
Probably because they're trying to promote digital copy instead of physical.
That's fucking stupid.
Agreed.
Like, in my opinion, it's just like me. I like physical stuff,
Yeah. It's yet another case of geeks like geek culture as it is. Don't go fucking meddling with things.
Okay, so I think this was one I sent too, like the next article. It is a bleeding full. I mean, not full. Cool article.
Oh dear.
No, actually, from what I gathered, it's not really. Okay, so yeah, like I said, this is from Bleeding Cool. This was published January 3rd, 2021. This written by Rich Johnson. Thank You Is Not Enough. What Do I Know by Stephen T. Siegel. Ironically, I originally saw this on Bounty in the Comics, but there was like a original post which led to here.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured we cover this more.
Okay. Yeah. Incidentally, I have nothing against Stephen T. Siegel, but anytime Rich Johnston comes up, I am duty bound to say "fuck you, Rich." So fuck you, Rich.
Hey, Don, you are kind of starting to lag and also robot voice.
Damn it. Better? Yeah, I'll pop out and pop back in.
Okay. Yeah, it always happens. These streams have always been a mess and will continue to be a mess for the rest of eternity. Wouldn't change it for the world, folks. Anyway, just give him a minute.
Again. Oh,
Oh,
hello.
Hi.
Okay. Moving on.
Actually, it might be on my side, maybe, because it was kind of weird, like kind of. No,
Yeah, okay.
wait.
Oh,
No,
God.
I think we're good. I think we're good.
Huzzah. Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Runs. All right. All right. Stephen T. Siegel is the co-creator of Big Hero 6, Ben 10, Generator Rex, Solstice, Camp Midnight, Imperial, Solstice, American Virgin, Allegra, and co-founder of the Man of Action Entertainment. There are a few things I haven't heard of from that
Yeah.
list. Clearly, he is a man of awesome status in the entertainment.
You missed a very, very obvious pun, and I can't allow it. You should have said he's clearly a man of action, and you're welcome.
I don't do puns. You know that. That's your shit.
I know, but if I hadn't said something, I think I would have physically exploded on camera. So, no, he is a man of action, and we're moving on.
He is also a founding member of Speak Theater Arts and has taught at Ball State University, Pasadena City College, and Mount San Antonio College.
I didn't realize he taught at universities. Well played, sir.
I'm curious what he teaches, actually, but
I imagine it would be arts or storytelling or something along those lines.
probably. I'm surprised he hasn't worked at CalArts as a tutor or.
Honestly, I don't think they would want him, and that's sad.
Of course.
Because so many of the awesome action cartoons of the 2000s were his babies.
Mm-hmm. He writes a new column for Bleeding Cool starting today. What do I know? And again, by today, that was January 3rd, 2021.
So this is going to be an ongoing series. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, thank you is not enough. I have grown weary of watching superhero and other comic book originated genre blockbuster films and TV shows and seeing the very last credit to be a swath of inspirational comic book creators lumped together for the non-credit credit of thanks, while others take credit for concrete, tangible aspects of that film or TV show that was whole cloth cut from the work of the people left holding the thanks in air quotes.
Yeah, I don't blame him here. I think
I agree.
think if anything, comics should get more credit for being basically the dominant genre in Hollywood right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And then the inevitable list of people, list of people the production forgot to give even a thanks to, while fully remembering to make use of their ideas. And there is a picture here. I wish I knew the context for this. With special thanks to Alex Ross, Mark Wade, J.M. DeMartise. If I said that name wrong, I'm sorry. Gardner Fox, Ramona Fradon, Keith Giffen, Bob Haney, Phil Jimenez, Kevin McGuire, Rags Morales, George Perez, Harry G. Peter, Greg Potter, Greg Rucka, Jesus Size, Nicola Scott, Lin Nguyen, the Marston family. It's a screen cap Wonder Woman 1984.
I find it annoying to see Mark Waid and Gardner Fox on the same list.
Same line, too.
Mark Waid, you do not deserve to kiss Gardner Fox's asshole. Gardner Fox was the creator of Dr. Fate and Spectre, and
also,
so many.
Well, this is because I did research on this myself, actually. He also created Jay Garrick, the Flash. So he's actually the original creator of like the Golden Age Flash.
Yeah, Gardner Fox is the Steve Ditko of the Golden Age of comics, basically. And being that as it may, seeing Mark Waid and Gardner Fox on the same list pisses me off.
Right. Okay. The patronizing trend of offering comic book creators thanks, without quotes, at the end of films or TV shows for specific characters, settings, scenarios, storylines, visual designs, any of the intellectual property creations comic book creators generate needs to stop. It should be replaced by actual appropriate credits and meaningful compensation. I think they are. Most of them are compensated.
I mean, I would hope so, but I think his rant here implies that they're not, and I've seen no reason not to believe him. So
yeah, I will be right back. Rant for whatever you want to say.
Okay. Yeah, I can't really fault him here. I again would not only do the creators of the comics deserve more credit, but I think this whole cynical comic book cinema is a blight on the movie industry bullshit needs to fucking die in a hole. This literally always happens anytime there's a new genre in Hollywood. The critical powers that be decide that kind of art will never be a real kind of art, and then that thing becomes the dominant genre in a bid to prove itself for like a decade, and then finally when that genre starts to get acceptance is when it starts to burn out, and then years go by in which there is no dominant genre in Hollywood, and then the very same critical old guard start complaining about, wasn't Hollywood great when we had a dominant genre to propel the medium of film to new heights? Why can't we have another dominant genre again? And then another new genre comes on the scene, and rather than be thankful that a new dominant genre has arrived, the old guard film press bitches and moans that that kind of art will never possibly be a real kind of art until it's proven itself worthy a dozen times over. And then it does, and then it dies, and then once again the cycle repeats. It happened with horror movies in the 30s, it happened with Western movies in the 60s and 70s, happened with mafia movies also kind of in the 70s, happened with sci-fi and fantasy blockbusters in the 80s, and on and on and on we go. Every time a new genre comes on the scene, the old guard film press holds their nose and tuts like a bunch of aristocrats and says that will never be real art. And generally speaking, I think the old guard film press needs to get the fuck over themselves, because every time a new genre comes on the scene, you actively try to sabotage it until it proves itself, and then when it eventually does actually burn out and fail like you wanted it to all along, then you bitch that it was missing. So yeah, not only do comic book creators need more credit for what they provide, but also um but also uh the comic book genre needs to get the old guard film press off the fuck its back, because I'm really sick of this. When will there eventually be superhero fatigue bullshit? There won't be as long as you want there to be, you dumbasses, because the more you up the difficulty setting on comic book genre being the dominant genre in Hollywood, the harder the comic book genre is going to try to get you to get the fuck off its back. So if you really want comic book genre to go the fuck away, Hollywood, what you need to do is you need to start giving it praise and treating it like a valid art form, because eventually it will even itself out and you won't have to deal with it anymore. But the more difficulty you pile on it, the more it's going to try to prove itself. And the more it proves itself, the more wrong you're going to end up being. Moving on.
Yep.
You there, Brainstormer?
Yeah, I'm back. I left real quick because things were getting a little buggy, so I figured.
Okay.
Okay. Yep, I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The idea that some creators are flattered enough by seeing their name up there anywhere on screen has led mega corporations to do exactly the same. See your name, you're welcome. But the fact is, those original ideas are in the very DNA of these big productions. They're not the inspirational afterthought, they are the thought itself.
Yeah. I
like
I can't really disagree with him here.
Yeah, I mean, like you remember Jerry Schuster and Joe.
Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster.
Yeah, Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster. At one point I used to mix up their last names.
Mm-hmm.
But they, like in the 70s, like right before it's like Christopher Reeve Superman.
Mm-hmm.
They were not given a penny for their creation of Superman since the 40s.
Which is a freaking travesty.
Yeah, like I remember, like I saw like a documentary that talked about this. Like I believe Joe, I don't remember which one, but one of them was working. They were working minimum wage, well not minimum wage, but they were working jobs in their old age without seeing like a
which for the guys who motherfucking created and brought to life Superman is they should have become millionaires off of the backs of creating Superman, for fuck's sake.
I believe they were able to get fairly compensated because of the Superman movie. But the Superman movie, like it opened, I believe it opened with, because it's been a long time since I've seen it, and I probably should watch it again. Honestly, they opened it with inspired by the characters created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. So I can understand, like most of the time they do often, like movies often save the credits for the end of a movie.
Yeah. And to be fair to other kinds of movies, novelists and other kinds of creators don't really fare much better.
Yeah.
Like you'll see, based on the characters and world of, I don't know, J.K. Rowling or Thomas Harris or whoever the author happens to be. But usually there's some kind of settlement beforehand of where we want to make your characters or your world into a movie. So here's
right. But the thing is, comic books are kind of a different story on the fact that when you create something, they aren't technically your creation anymore.
Yeah.
They're the companies, which is a whole thing unto itself.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms I really don't want to get into, because I'm of two minds on it.
Yeah, same here. maybe that'll be something we do a discussion about later.
Yeah, because I really don't. I hate this whole supremacy of the author bullshit in the sense of like, um, I'm the one who created this character, so only I can have anything intelligent to say on them.
Yeah, that I
Thing.
don't agree with. I do think there should be credit when credit is given, or
Yeah,
where credit is due. Like,
yeah.
I believe that. I do think fucking over a character like the New 52 did.
Or like either of the big two are currently doing by way of social justice.
Yeah, that too. I think it's more Marvel than DC at the moment, but
Well, but I mean, for
it's still
every new Warriors, there's an I'm not Starfire. So
fair enough. Oh, dude, we should have covered that. I totally forgot about that.
yeah, we that maybe we should put that up for next week.
Yeah. Or was granted, shows like Arrow, which do take inspiration from Green Arrow, kind of become their own thing over time, or like their own interpretation of the character and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a complicated slope. I do think again, like there should be credit where it's due for like the original creators and people who have like ideas that you're taking
Yeah,
from
and I
them.
mean when they take a storyline and they adapt it, that there is obviously some credit to be given there. Also, and I'm gonna be a little bit more even handed with this in the sense of um not only should um not only should authors get credit when storylines they came up with are used as a basis or whatever, but if nothing else, that should be a reason for the adapters to make as few changes as possible, i.e., if the creator is compensated for using their storyline, then the creators of the show should then actually have to try and accurately adapt the storyline. Because I'm
Um,
really sick of this. We're taking the base idea of your storyline and we're changing everything else about it. Bullshit. It annoys the fuck out of me.
um,
If you're going to adapt it, then try to adapt it as closely as you can with the medium permitting.
I'm
Obviously, some changes need to be made for like runtime and visual storytelling and whatnot. But
also budget.
hmm,
Also budget.
yeah, but
Um,
barring those restrictions that you can't do anything about, changing shit just for the sake of changing shit
yeah. See,
it
I'm
is annoying.
that itself. I am also of two minds of. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like I agree with you to a point, but you know me, like whenever I do like rewrites or pitches for certain things,
Yeah.
I change it to fit the story that is being told within the confines of the video I'm doing.
Yeah, but I think that's different though because as I've always said, if you think you can do better or equal to what the original storyline did, then that's one thing. But if you're just changing shit to change shit, then that's another thing. If
Okay,
you're changing
that's
shit in order to fix what's broken, even though it's not broken, then you are a twat.
right. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I was going to pull out the example of the Spectacular Spider-Man, created and I believe co-written by Greg Weisman, who has also done Young Justice
Hmm.
and various other things that I can't remember that he's done.
Hmm.
But he's like kind of what you consider a god in the animation, in like superhero animation,
Hmm.
mostly. But with the Spectacular Spider-Man, like it incorporates various different things about the Spider-Man lore,
Hmm.
but
But
obviously
it spins them.
it spins them in a way that is appropriate for that universe. Like it's um
Like I remember when the goblin serum was used as a steroid metaphor.
yeah. That show, for one thing, has remained as popular as it has, to the point where people are still asking for it to be renewed for a, I believe, third and fourth season.
Yeah. And the only reason it was canceled was because Disney fucked everything up.
Right.
And instead, we had to deal with Drake Bell basically being discount Deadpool with his
Yeah, they
Spider-Man.
based a little too much on Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man run, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and don't even get me started on what they did to Doctor Strange, or we will be here till creation ends.
Right. Okay. Ironically, I'm not opposed. I wasn't opposed to Drake Bell being Spider-Man. I just think he should have been given better material to work with.
Yeah, he did fine with what he was given. It's just what he was given was basically play Spider-Man as though Spider-Man was Deadpool.
Mm-hmm. And Deadpool out Deadpooled Spider-Man in that show too.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't beat the original, folks. You can't out
Also,
Deadpool.
also, it was voiced by the guy who voiced Terry McGinnis, aka Batman Beyond, and Ron Stoppable from Kim Possible.
I didn't realize those were the same voice actor.
He's a good voice actor. Then
Yeah.
Will
This makes the one scene from the Kim Possible movie where Ron is tormenting Draken because he fucked with Bueno Nacho and going say my name even more dramatic than otherwise.
it's Will Will Friedle. He's also Eric on Boy Meets World.
That guy has some serious range. Fuck.
Yes, he does.
Or should I say booyah? because Ron,
Yep.
you got the joke. Okay.
I'm not stupid. Dude, I grew up on Kim Possible. You think I wouldn't know? I was also thinking Cyborg, but given what we were talking to, I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I want to see a Teen Titans Kim Possible crossover just to see who out booyahs who there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The film and TV series would not hold the shape it does without those original creators' ideas. The actors would often not play the characters the way they do without the original conception. Fan base gravitating to those original elements in the film or TV show out of a sense of nostalgia, specifically geeking out over the preceding work's presence. Again, I understand, but there's also, like, I don't disagree with him, but there's also the factor that um, those base ideas lend themselves to creative interpretation as well.
Well, I mean, they do, but I guess I'm more on his side with this because
Well, I'm trying to be.
I'm always of the opinion that you should do whatever you can to make things as accurate as possible and not meddle unless you actually can make an improvement, which is very, very hard to do. You should not you shouldn't think you're better than the source material generally.
No,
Then
that's
again, I
fair.
would also say the same thing to the authors themselves, not thinking that they are the gods of whatever universes they discovered.
Again, that's fair, and I'm not disagreeing with you
Mm-hmm.
or Steve or Mr. Siegel here.
Yeah.
I'm just obviously myself as a creator myself. I'm of the mindset that uh, create just overall creative freedom than anything.
I mean, yes, but the problem is a lot of the changes they make aren't creative changes. They're trying to oversimplify things a lot of the time.
Yeah,
And
I agree. I'm just again like my take is take ideas, use them to the best of your ability, but also be willing to like. It's the same thing when I talk about like getting people to do adaptions with.
Mm-hmm.
When you find a director, find someone who respects the source material, but is also
Yeah.
willing to go a different
Yeah.
route than source material.
It's why we scrutinize it so much when there is a director or writer announced for something that's a previous or an adaptation of something previous, because the style of the person doing the adaptation is going to carry over into the source material. So if it's a mismatch, if it's someone who doesn't jive well with the material, then that's a bad thing. Whereas if you, for example, get Sam Raimi to do Doctor Strange 2, that has potential to be a good idea because Doctor Strange and Sam Raimi's own personal style kind of mesh, or they could. It can also go horribly, horribly wrong, and I'm not being overly optimistic about that, but there is a possibility that this could work, is the thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Moving forward, the new fans responding to the film or TV show are often responding to story beats, character tropes, plots, and visual designs that worked in the original telling of the stories, and are working the same way again.
Agreed. Yeah.
While a different step up from the previous trend of simply appropriating the ideas and creative work of original creators and attributing it solely to people's craftsmanship on the new production, this thanks Band-Aid is not a respectful or balanced payout for those original contributions. Again, I don't disagree. I do think he's kind of yeah, I don't disagree. I just think it's a little
I don't think he's saying that the new creative teams had no input. I think he's just acknowledging a lot of times they just take what I did or what what he did and do it worse. And yet they still don't feel the need to um give anything more than the token thanks,
yeah.
which I can definitely sympathize with
Yeah, no,
because
yeah. Um
if an idea that I had suddenly was making $1 billion every time, I might want to see some blowback from that.
yeah, okay. The people without whom the giant cinematic or television tentpole would not function in the same way. In some cases, would not function at all, and has not when these original elements are jettisoned. Captain Marvel should and must be credited appropriately and compensated at the scale of the project.
On this point, I completely and totally agree with him because this is why every time Hollywood tries to fix superhero genre by removing everything superhero about it, it fails horribly. This is why the '90s X-Men were shit in comparison to the '90s animated series X-Men, because the '90s animated series tried their darndest to stay true to the comics, and the Fox X-verse tried to dumb down the X-Men and turn them into just a generic action sci-fi franchise instead of a comic book movie. And I also agree with him that Captain Marvel is shit. So yay!
No. I spoke. I.
Oh, you added that in. He didn't say that. Aw, that's
No.
a shame. I almost was gonna give Bleeding Cool credit for allowing somebody to write for them who dissed Captain Marvel, but
Mm,
alas, it is not the case.
okay. Uh, no, but it does. Captain Marvel still sucks because it removed everything that made the character of Carol Danvers from the comics, like the
Yeah.
original Carol Danvers interesting. And mainly,
Yeah.
I only know Carol.
Although to be fair to the movie, the comics themselves have been doing that for a while, for pretty
I
much
did.
as long as they
I
decided
said,
he needed to be a
yeah, but
flagship.
I said the original comics.
Yeah.
Granted, the
By
only
which I assume you mean the Miss Marvel comics from like
yes,
the 80s.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also possibly early 2000s. I'm not entirely sure, but uh, ironically, the only version of Captain Miss Marvel that I know is from Avengers: Earth Mightiest Heroes, which is an amazing show, by the way, and I believe it's on Netflix. So and
Yeah.
Disney Plus. So go check that out.
Yeah.
If you actually want a proper Captain Marvel, I would suggest checking out Mark Pellegrini's and Tim Lim's Common America. I believe Volume 3 is on Kickstarter and Indiegogo at the moment.
Although, don't skip over volumes 1 and 2, because especially in volume 2, you might be a bit surprised by who indeed makes a cameo.
Quit stroking your ego.
I can enjoy this. Get off my back.
But yeah, now that it is Common America is a parody of uh, slash kind of homage to the original Miss Marvel. And from what I've gathered, it's actually really good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Also, please support independent creators, and I mean by their merit. So
yeah, and in particular, Tim and Mark, because they're friends of the show. As in, we have actually had them on an episode, even though it didn't go anything like I was expecting it would go. But no plan survives contact with the enemy, and in this case, the enemy was reality. So
yeah. Also, not just because they're fans, but because we also respect their work on their merit and stuff.
Yeah. Also, they're genuinely cool guys, and so they deserve some credit.
Yeah.
For doing work. And in a sane world, they would just be doing it for, one of the major companies, because the major companies would be able to see that they had talent. But we don't live in a sane world. We live in a world where Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini have to publish independently, but New Warriors and I'm Not Starfire get the big two treatment.
Yep. Anyway, moving forward, let's set aside the idea that if the creative material is inspirational enough to warrant greenlighting a massively budgeted entertainment enterprise, then the creators of that original content should be hired and given actual meaningful seats at the creative table on a production itself. No, I agree with that. I do. Like, I honestly, like, I mean, this is coming from me who constantly thinks if you're going to have certain things in a story, and I think you and I have had this conversation maybe at some point where I've talked about like getting, like if you're going to have a story about soldiers, obviously you need to get like proper soldiers who've done that as consultants.
Getting some experienced, getting some expertise or getting some perspective of someone with expertise makes sense. And if you're borrowing from a given story or story template, who better to ask than the guy who did it originally? Now that doesn't mean that every time a creative says something that you should listen to them, because sometimes part of what movies do is edit down or translate the original work. But to try and adapt a given storyline without any deference towards the person who made the original storyline is kind of fucked and really, really rather stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but I do agree with it. Like, if you are adapting something, you should, if you can, get the original creators to sit down at the creative table and work with them.
Yeah. And this isn't even a moral like imperative or anything. This is just your story will probably be better if you try to stick to whatever made the story good in the first place. And if you want to know what made the story good in the first place, a good place to start after you've checked with the fan base to figure out what people actually like about the thing is the person that made it popular in the first place.
which is why and like this is a total side tangent, but we've been doing this all night, so
Hmm.
yeah, that's why I'm kind of interested to see Todd McFarlane's Spawn, like the movie, because one, it's Todd McFarlane directing it, which obviously would be his first directorial credit,
Yeah.
but he wrote.
I hope he's good, and more to the point, I hope he's better than Frank Miller was when he tried this.
Well, I think he'll have a good visual style because he drew the Spawn comics when they first came out, so and those
Hmm.
are pretty good in terms of layout.
I'm just hoping this isn't another Hellboy reboot kind of situation because
Yeah, I'm again. We'll get that. We'll get more into that.
well it's true that it's a good idea to get the author's second opinion on a story. Sometimes that this is a sad truth, but sometimes the people who create and discover an IP don't necessarily understand that IP.
Yeah.
My preferred example, or my preferred example because I have two of them, are Thomas Harris and the guy who wrote Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In the case of Thomas Harris, he is a perfect example of how an author does not necessarily understand their own creation a lot of the time because he when the Hannibal Lecter franchise became as popular as it became, he responded to that by making a book called Hannibal Rising, which was supposed to kind of be the origin story for Hannibal Lecter. The problem being his origin story has bumfuck nothing to do with what makes the character awesome, and so when they tried to turn that into a movie, it was shit and terrible. Um, and is basically the example of a person who is the creator or writer of a thing not understanding their own creation. And the more positive example of an author not necessarily being the end all and be all of their own creation is after the movie of Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, the guy who wrote the book it was based on liked the way that the movie handled it better, and so wrote a sequel that retconned the first book because he was able to acknowledge that the movie did it better, which does happen sometimes. Very, very, very rarely, but it happens sometimes. Sometimes the fans and the people who are the second opinion on a given IP can understand it better than the people who are the first on the scene, as it were.
Yeah.
But that can often sometimes be resolved by creators actually engaging with their fan bases and taking constructive criticism from their fan bases. As much as that is heresy in modern day Hollywood. Yeah. It's always a good idea to have a proofreader, folks, even if it's something plot related and not grammar related.
Yeah. Like I'm pretty sure I've said this a few other times in those situations, but it's universal. It's a case by case scenario in terms of what is said here.
Yeah.
Okay. Meaningful seats at the creative table on the production itself because they thought of the things the current storytellers are enamored with and are probably as equipped as anyone to extrapolate that material in directions that will further build the creation out in entertaining ways.
Agreed. Now, my sort of asterisk on this is that doesn't mean the author is the end all and be all on the project, and nor should they be. Again, as an example, Mike Mignola claimed that the third Hellboy movie was more accurate to his comics than either of the Guillermo del Toro ones were, and we all know how that worked out. So you should definitely also get input from informed fan groups and so on, because because the fan base that gathers around a thing sometimes can manage to understand it better than even the people who made it. Not always, and not even very commonly, but it does happen. It's always a good idea to get a second opinion, even if you're the author.
Mm-hmm. Because we can take care of the easier pieces of this non-puzzle first and write a whole essay about that thought later. So here are the two simple remedies needed. Okay. Number one, the proper credit is not thanks. It is concepts created by creator's name, character name created by creator's name, costume designed by creator's name, etc.
Okay, that's fair. It might be being slightly overly pedantic, but that's fair.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. There is a certain question that brings up, like, what if you do a redesign? Well, it still keeps certain elements from, like, there's a little.
Yeah. It's one of those gray areas of like, because I know Marvel, in the case of the MCU, they employ a single costume designer to basically do all of the Marvel
Yeah.
redesigns.
Granted, the weirdest thing is, while they look fairly comic like, the thing is that they go, like with Marvel, a lot of them are more paramilitary than anything.
Hmm
And I
The
don't.
yeah the notable exception being Doctor Strange's, and he does actually look like a monk crossed with a sorcerer, which is how he's supposed
Right.
to look. So well done.
Which again, like I get and all. There are certain things that should be, like, I don't like, it's a good concept. Obviously, I do think it would be very long listed if you took various elements from various different runs of a certain character. But
Hmm
I'm not disagreeing with it. I do think, again, like, you're right, it is a gray area, and it should be more handled as a case by case scenario than anything.
Yeah. Um. Uh. And this goes back to his point about having the creator on the actual staff of the writing team where possible. I think a good middle ground to this would be asking the person themselves what credit they actually want, or
Yeah.
what they would consider insulting to not get credit for, maybe, and then give them the credits that they desire. Um, because if you have the original creator on the writing staff anyway, then just ask them what they want and then give it to them. It's fine.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like the best way to handle this, because some authors might not want every successive element that somebody borrowed to have a space in the credits. Because let's be honest, that would also make credits longer, and nobody cares about the credits anyway. In most cases, so
Well, my uncle and I stay toward watch the whole thing, because sometimes there might be end credits,
mhm.
which I never really like those whole end credits at the end of the credits thing. You know,
Yeah, it doesn't really.
like,
I've really also started taking to hating um the whole putting the title of the movie after the end of the movie instead of at the beginning thing. That doesn't make any goddamn sense to me.
I haven't seen that actually lately.
It might have been a trend that died, but I know like Doctor Strange 2016, they put Doctor Strange at the end of the credits instead of in the beginning.
There are special, again, like, there are certain gray areas with that, on the fact that Batman Begins does that,
Hmm
but for story reasons, actually.
Which I guess is fair, but in general, if you're going to have a title or a title sequence, put it at the beginning of the movie instead of the end.
Fair enough. Oh, you said title sequences. Oh yeah, no, I thought you just meant titles.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah, like, I never understood why they would do that, like the whole extravagant end credit sequences, which honestly should have been the
Yeah.
opening titles. Like Iron Man 3 had one of the coolest, like, in my opinion, had one of the coolest um, credit sequences,
Hmm.
but it was at the end of the movie.
Yeah, Doctor Strange had the same thing, and the thing that really pissed me off about it was the credit sequence that they had at the end of Doctor Strange 2016 was more trippy and surreal and psychedelic than anything that was in the goddamn movie. And I'm like, if you could do this and you justified doing this, then why wasn't any of this in the actual movie?
Mm-hmm. Anyway, very simple, more than one creator involved. While you'll often hear as a rationale that this makes it impossible to credit everyone, it, of course, does not. Um, yes and no?
I mean, it depends on how you want to handle giving them credit.
Yeah.
Like if you want to just make a list of, creators that influenced this movie or this work and then list them all, then no. But if you're going to do what you suggested and credit every like costume change or every separate part of a character's backstory or what have you, and separately make a credit for each creator that involved it or was involved in it, then that's gonna make the credits kind of unwieldy. Is the problem?
Yeah, we're not saying like do the list with thanks to, obviously. We're not agreeing to that. Like you're right.
No, but yeah,
I
it
think
really
you
depends
have
on
to kind of go.
how pedantic are you wanting to be? Are you wanting to give a separate credit to every element that a person might have contributed, or do you want just a list of all the people involved in the various creations and things? Then you know you get there's got to be some kind of give here. Either you can have one creator get all of the credits that you listed there, or you can have a list of creators that all get one, like, you know, um, this movie is heavily influenced by creations and intellectual property from, and then list all the creators.
Yeah.
But trying to do both of those, trying to do both the lengthy compartmentalized list and the list of every single creator involved is
Okay.
going to get really unwieldy.
Mm-hmm. Check out that thank you list at the very end of the production for proof that people can indeed be grouped under a single listing in the credits. No problem. Again, like that listing, yeah, it is wrong because it's just a generalized thing, sure.
Hmm.
Um, but
Unless that's what he's saying he wants. Like, if he's saying that's the kind of thing he wants, then yeah, that there should be no problem with that.
no, no, the how they do the thanks to at the end at the very end of every credits. See
Hmm.
that I think that's that what he's saying is the problem.
I think so.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
again I agree with. Like it's too generalizing um, for each creator involved.
yeah. The, again, this is another thing that could be resolved by just asking the
Well,
creators what they want.
the bigger thing is there are certain like with the picture that was shown earlier with like Gardner Fox and stuff. Like there are creators that are unfortunately passed away now,
Hmm.
but
And also, how are you going to differentiate creators that had more impact on a character than others? That is also a thing.
that's yeah. Again,
Like Stan Lee had more impact on Spider-Man than, I don't know, um
Steve Ditko.
well, true, but I was thinking um one of the later stewards of Spider-Man that also would technically need to be given credit. Like Steve
Terry Conway.
Stan Lee had more impact on Spider-Man than Joe Quesada did. um, or Chip Zdarsky, or one of the modern writers. So how are you going to make that distinction too? Because I think the most credit should be given to the person who did the most work on the character or the IP. And that works too if the person who had the most impact on a character didn't occur until later in the character's timeline. Like, for example, if they ever make a Sandman movie, a lot of credit needs to be given to Neil Gaiman, because Neil Gaiman revolutionized Sandman to such a ludicrous degree.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The point is simple. If the film or TV show knows the thing that they are thanking an original creator for, then they can actually credit that specific creator for that specific creation, and should. Credits are free, they cost nothing, so to withhold a proper credit is unconscionable. I agree.
Yeah. Again, you kind of run into the logistical problem of the credits being way longer, but I think it depends on how specific and how pedantic he wants to be about this.
I think that's kind of why, like for me, I work better as original creations.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, if I ever do adaptations, I might take this into consideration. Probably actually take it into consideration.
Yeah.
But there has to be kind of a line drawn, and so this doesn't get out of control. Is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so by speaking of cost, compensation is the other practice that needs to be brought to light. Okay, so number 2, proper compensation for these original ideas is not nothing. Okay, no one. I don't think anyone ever said it was.
Yeah. Anyone who has just not paid the person and then given them a thanks in the credits is a dickhead. And
Yep.
also, I think they can be sued.
Yep. Nor is it a thanks. Nor is it a random low dollar payment. Payment a production will not miss. But a comic creator might be thrilled to get out of the blue. Again, no one. I don't think anyone's really.
It depends on what you mean by low dollar that a production company won't miss, because that Hollywood functions in the millions to billions of dollar range. So an amount of money that your average movie production won't miss could still conceivably be a lot of money.
I'd say for like if we're talking original creators, probably.
I think it depends on how much impact the creator in question had on the thing, and also how much of the creator's thing they're using.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they're just using broad strokes, then that should be reflected. But if they're adapting entire storylines or entire arcs from the source material, then that should also be taken into account.
Yeah. Again, like it's a really case by case scenario deal.
Yeah. And again, it also revolves around what the creator in question actually wants, which I do think should be taken into account.
Yeah. See, I can never do this whole contracting thing. It's not me.
Mm.
No, it's just like the whole politics of like a contract are just so over my head.
Uh-huh.
I'm a man of my word kind of deal. Like,
Yeah.
make
You need to get a lawyer, I think.
probably.
Or an agent.
Probably both.
Yeah.
Films and TV shows hire and pay artisans quite a lot to plot, write, design, storyboard, etc. The original creators of elements used should be paid at least at the rates of others working on the production for bringing the thing the production doesn't have to create from the ground up.
Yeah, again, it depends on how much of the original idea they end up keeping. But yeah, generally speaking, I would agree with that.
Yeah. The thing that always works. And then the creator should be paid for making the original thing that is going to make someone else very, very wealthy. A meaningful premium is not going to bankrupt a massive production.
I would agree, but again, this is something that I think the creator and um the adapters need to have a conversation about themselves, because let's say we were gonna take something that he wrote and we were gonna pay him like $10,000 for the use of whatever IP. Let's say we were making a Ben 10 movie or something. He might find $10,000 insulting, but you give it to somebody else and they would go, $10,000 is plenty for the use of my IP or whatever. Obviously, I'm not saying that's a fair compensation. I
I
just
think
pulled the number out of thin air.
I think
But
there's also the whole thing with the whole payback from the proceeds from the movie, like the tickets bought and stuff.
yeah, I do think the industry term for that is a back end deal, and I do think the creator getting something off of the back end makes sense.
Yeah, I do think there should obviously be an initial pay as well, like a paycheck.
Yeah, yeah, but including creators in back end deals makes sense, and there's literally no harm in it, and that's just incentive to make more money. Like as much as Alan Moore probably would disdain it, given how much of Joker was based on the Killing Joke, um I think him getting something probably wouldn't be a bad thing. Even though, like I said, in the case of Alan Moore, he would probably hate you for even insinuating it. But such is life. But again, this is why an important step in this would be to ask the creator in question, what do you feel is just compensation in this case? And then, much like anything in Hollywood, negotiation is important.
Yeah. Again, this is kind of why I don't think I would work well within Hollywood and prefer the indie scene.
In DC, yes. You just need to get yourself a good lawyer and a good agent, preferably somebody who could do both.
An agent that's also a lawyer.
Yeah, they exist. Because there's a lot of overlap between agents and lawyers.
Fair, but I'm sure most of them would be scumbags.
Well, I mean,
I have my
you
opinion.
get what you pay for. If you want a lawyer that you can.
I was gonna say, like, that's just my opinion of lawyers and agents in general.
Well, you're probably not on the cards wrong, but also, this is why you vet a lawyer or an agent before going into business with them. As with any person you hire to perform a service for you, you want to vet them to make sure they're someone you can actually rely on to do their job and do it well and not fuck you over.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, simple. And yes, I'm fully aware that work for hire is work for hire. And people sign contracts and take payments for their work in exchange for rights, in air quotes. But let's be real here. Many of these deals were done when no one had any idea what these characters and concepts would become financially. So if the financial outlook changes on one side, it's up to the producers to be quality people and change the outlook on the other side.
I mean, yeah, I'm of two minds on this because yes, that is something that I would consider incumbent on the producers to an extent, but also don't be a cheap bastard and sell your soul for what is ultimately a pittance. Know your own worth and the worth of the shit you're creating. So, on some level, yes, I agree that the producers should realize that, the change in circumstances changes the arrangement, but also, um, a second part of the solution is don't sell yourself short. You, as an example, um, the guy who founded McDonald's ended up selling it to a salesman, um, before it had really taken off as a franchise. Cut to 10 years later, and the salesman that he sold it to is now a multi-millionaire because McDonald's is McDonald's, and the guy who was the original founder gets bunkus because he undersold himself.
Wasn't there like a docu movie about that with uh with Michael Keaton? And he has disappeared. Give him a second, folks. Hmm.
Okay, when did it cut me off? Because I thought that you had left the room again.
Oh no, I assumed you were done talking. So I started reading again.
Okay, where did um
Um, fuck. I don't. Um, you.
curse you, StreamYard?
Well, I assumed. Yeah, you stopped like after you got explaining about the whole his creation and that conversation and the whole conversation thing. I mean, like if you want to start again, that's fine. Like,
Uh so you didn't hear anything I said about creators also need to be smart enough to.
Yeah, no, I heard that. I heard that too.
Okay.
Like I said, I assumed you were done talking. So
Okay. Fuck.
you don't remember
Continue, I guess.
Okay. Simple, and yes, I am fully aware that work for hire is work for hire, and people sign contracts and take payments for their work in exchange for rights, in air quotes.
Okay, you read that. You read that already.
Okay. But let's be real here. Many of these deals were done when no one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Finish that. Did you? Was there anything?
Yeah. The thing about that is, yes, I agree that producers need to realize that a change in circumstances changes the arrangement, but creatives need to also be smart enough to not undersell themselves. Great example, and one I already made, but apparently no one heard, is the guy who actually founded McDonald's is
Yeah. No,
not.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that part. And I brought up that there wasn't there like a video, not a video, a movie about that starring Michael Keaton.
Yes, it was called The Founder.
Yeah. So that's where it ended. Like after you'd done that, and I thought that you were done. So I
Okay. Okay. So the rest of that story is he ended up the founder of McDonald's ended up selling his company to um a salesman before it became a major franchise. Cut to 10 years later, the guy he sold it to is now a multi-millionaire because it's McDonald's, and he gets nothing because because the guy who originally founded McDonald's undersold himself. So I think it's incumbent on creators not to undersell themselves as well. Have faith in yourself and your IP, and don't undersell yourself, and then you won't need to be in the situation to begin with where you're in a fucked situation and you can't change the contract because the contract won't be fucked to begin with.
right.
Moving on.
Yep. Okay. All right. So if the financial outlook changed, I read that, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Create happy original characters who will spread the good news about the production because they have been correctly credited and valued, properly taken care of, and also no, the public is not fully aware of what goes on behind the scenes to cajole or force creators into accepting non-beneficial terms, often after the fact, often against their best interest. So let's save all that for another essay and stay on the topic at hand.
Okay, well, again, and this is where my problem with what he said previously comes in. You as the creator should also be smart enough to not undervalue yourself. Um, and yes, I am aware that sleazy business practices and shit like that does happen, and to some extent, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you if you want to swim with sharks, you've got to make sure you can bite back. And Hollywood is unfortunately a tank full of fucking sharks for the most part. So if you want to fuck with Hollywood, or Hollywood comes to fuck with you, make certain that you insist on not being a person who's fucked with. If that makes any sense.
Yes.
If you know you're going into the den of a bunch of lions, then it's incumbent upon you to make sure you're pretty good at lion taming. Or at the very least, hire a lawyer or an agent who can do it for you.
Yep. Okay. So when it comes to saying thanks, in in air quotes, for the previous labors of comic book creators and massive franchises, thanks is the least a mega productions can do, but the least should not be the standard. The standard, a simple one to meet, much should be much higher. Proper credit, proper re, rem, 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 rumor, rumni, I don't know this word. Remuneration.
Remuneration.
I'm not even going to attempt to say that.
It's a fancy word for payback.
Oh, okay. Let's stop with all the we don't know how to credit and pay people nonsense. This is exactly how. Please do it. Go for the all win. It's better.
To be fair, this is a problem that Hollywood has internally as well. And if you don't think that, then talk to extras sometime. It's some of the most or stunt people. It's some of the most thankless, ridiculous, stupid, self-destructive bullshit you can imagine.
Yeah, I will never understand that. Like, there's a YouTube series called Stuntmen React. Amazing stuff, by the way. I've never missed an episode.
Mm-hmm. And for the record, this is one of the reasons why everyone in Hollywood loves Keanu Reeves, because he saw that the stuntmen for The Matrix were getting fucked over, and he took like a third of his paycheck and bought them all motorcycles and shit. Because Keanu is just that nice a guy.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the whole pay thing is it's really weird that there are certain people who do so much and are kind of just undervalued. And I really think that should be changed.
Especially when CEOs and you know the money pushers of the companies really are not good at their job. And as an example of that, I need point no further than the Zack Snyderverse for DC. Because I think everyone at this point knows that DC's biggest supervillain during that time was Warner Brothers itself. Because they kept trying to fix their own IP, and their IP wasn't broken, so inevitably they ended up breaking it a lot. Meanwhile, the movie that they were almost certain was going to bomb hard, and so they didn't need to meddle with it, Joker, um, ended up being one of the most successful movies Warner Brothers has ever even fucking made. Is it not funny how that works?
Yeah. Anyway, so we got one last thing to do, and we kind of talked about it yesterday. Didn't go too much in depth.
Mm-hmm.
But I recently saw Wonder Woman 84. I was actually we were meaning to do this like the first week, but I didn't have a chance to go see it.
Mm-hmm.
Hold up, let me pull it up. So we have something there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Wonder Woman.
Overall thoughts before we really get into the nitty gritty. It's a meh film for me, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like it,
And my overall thoughts is this is 2 or 3 really good movies, all haphazardly thrown together and not edited well. And the result is, like Brainstormer was saying, just kind of meh.
yeah. Dawn, I'm thinking will handle more of the lore side, while I'll be
Mhm.
handling more of the technical side with the movie itself.
Yeah, so everyone get out your drinks. This is going to be a double drinking game of epic proportions.
I should get a drink. Okay, I'll be right back.
Mhm. If you want to sing out, sing out. And if you want to be free, be free. 'Cause there's a million ways to be, you know that there are. And if you wanna live high, live high. And if you wanna live low, live low. 'Cause there's a million ways to go, you know that there are. You can do what you want.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
I got milk. What?
Got milk.
Oh, I haven't thought about. I haven't seen those things since I was in elementary school. Like those.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to that ad campaign, but it was a thing like well until I was in high school. I don't know what happened to it.
Huh. Anyway, yeah, like what Dalton said, like it feels like it's. You and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. Like, it's too. It feels too short. Like there should have been like an extra 30 or 40 minutes added to it.
Yeah. Which is saying something because it was already 2.5 hours to begin with.
I did not feel that, honestly. I didn't feel like that. It felt like an hour, honestly, when I was watching it. And that's not a good thing.
Not in this case, no, because
No, not
it's supposed to be an epic blockbuster, and it just kind of feels ultimately inconsequential.
like runtime wise, it made like a similar situation was 2017 Justice League.
Yeah.
Like the movie just felt too quick. Yeah, like I said, like I said to you yesterday when we talked about this on Discord. It feels there's not really a moment to breathe. Like there aren't any real slow moments,
Mm-hmm.
which I think really would have helped it.
Yeah.
Um,
And meanwhile, even though it is a fast-paced movie, there isn't a whole lot of action, which I think a lot of people came for. So
yeah. Ironically, I don't think the setting was bad. Like even from the,
no.
I did have a gripe with like the promotional material, like getting a little too neon esque.
Mm.
I think I mentioned this before when we talked about earlier, like beginning of the year or something, beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
But it feels so, yeah, like it's too fast to the point where like it doesn't, like there's stuff there and some of it works, but there are no like scenes where it's just downtime and allowing the characters to interact, and just small moments that would have helped, I think, great
Yeah.
better. Like what the first Wonder Woman did, which there were small moments and like moments of just downtime to take a breather.
Mm-hmm.
That
Even the most epic moment in the first movie could be kind of considered downtime, which is Wonder Woman going off into no man's land.
mm-hmm.
And yet that scene will go down in history as one of the greatest scenes in any comic book movie ever.
I actually like the campfire scene.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
it took me a second to figure out which scene you meant.
I can't remember the other characters besides her and Steve because I don't. They weren't given enough time. They weren't not given enough time. They were just, the names are kind of hard to remember because I haven't seen that movie since 2017.
I like how they kind of made Etta Candy her Jimmy Olsen.
Mm-hmm. And actually, like one of my favorite parts from this movie, Wonder Woman 84, or 1984, is that they show the time progression with like her and Etta like hanging out, even though like Etta's like an old woman at this point. I think
Yeah.
that was nice. Like even if it was the opening scene, I thought that was really nice and cool.
Yeah, because I mean, you're not gonna turn your back on your friends, and they already know Diana is an immortal demigoddess, so they're not gonna be surprised of her not aging.
Mm-hmm. Again, like my major issue is like everything after like the opening. It just feels too quick.
It all feels like it's thrown together. Like there's a lot of different bits and pieces that work like independently and individually, but when you try to combine them with all the other pieces, all the other moving parts, it becomes this patchwork stitched together mess that
I
doesn't
do
really
have,
make any coherent sense.
yeah, plot wise, it's very contrived, honestly. Not to say like the first one wasn't, but I think it was better paced. Was the
Yeah.
thing again? Like that's kind of like the major issue for this movie is the pacing, and I kind of disagree with a lot of people who were saying like it stunk because of Wonder Woman. I
Yeah, Gal Gadot is as immortally Wonder Woman as ever. And anyone who says otherwise is not paying attention.
mhm.
Um, it was everything around Diana that didn't make any goddamn sense.
Yeah. Again, like I feel like if you shortened a few unnecessary scenes, and made a few other scenes longer,
Yeah,
and again, just given time for
and I mentioned this the other day as well. Um, dear movie studios, stop doing two villains in one movie, please, for the love of God, because
um
it's very very hard to do right, and usually what happens is it distracts from one or both of them, and you end up getting two really interesting villains not given their dues because they're trying to split time with the other one.
yeah, I agree, but also I don't. I think the main issue is not because I think both Cheetah and Maxwell, and like we'll get into this, because we had a brief conversation about this again,
Mm-hmm.
like yesterday. So, um, I like Maxwell Lord as he's supposed to be like the main villain, right?
Yeah,
Like for thematic purposes, I believe.
yeah. I think for the sake of the movie, what should have happened is you should have had Cheetah doing her whole "she's all that" routine, um, as a subplot or as comic relief, maybe, and then introduce her as Cheetah either at the very, very end of the movie in like a post-credit scene, or wait until the beginning of the third movie. Um,
Yeah,
you didn't need Cheetah actually cheetahing in this movie. You could have indicated that the she's all that routine was happening, and then saved Cheetah as one of the villains in the third movie, and
mm,
then devoted the extra time that you would now have to um, rounding out Maxwell Lord more. Which isn't to say that I thought he needed it. He's Maxwell Lord is probably the single element of Wonder Woman 1984 that unquestioningly works.
yeah.
But
And again, like you and I had again, like a lot of the stuff we had already conversated about earlier, yesterday
hmm
when we just hung out and talked about it.
yeah,
But a lot of people were saying like even before the movie was coming out that he was going to be like an allegory to uh, a certain president that we recently had for 4 years. Because I don't want
well,
to.
we still have him for another like week and a half.
Yep. But he's really not at all. Like
No,
he's a fascinating character, and Pedro, Pedro,
Pedro Pascal.
yeah, Pedro Pascal plays him to perfection. Like,
Yeah, and to those that would say he's a Trump allegory, two things. To those in favor of Trump, that say he's a Trump allegory, there's too much villainy to him to make him a pro-Trump allegory. And to those that insist that he's an anti-Trump allegory, he's too much of a sympathetic character to be an anti-Trump allegory. And
right.
we know because for the last 4 goddamn years and change, we've gotten a look at what the powers that be seem to think a accurate Trump allegory is, and he's nothing like that.
Right. But other than that, like the weird thing is Maxwell Lord has black hair and Pedro Pascal has black hair. So I don't know why they changed him to like blonde.
That may well have been a stylistic choice, or it may well have been trying to make a Trump allegory. But again, the thing is, if he's supposed to be a pro-Trump allegory, then good luck surviving the Hollywood lynching for making a pro-Trump allegory.
Right.
And
right.
if he's supposed to be an anti-Trump allegory, he's too much of a sympathetic character with too many human motivations to be what Hollywood would consider an anti-Trump allegory.
But either way, like he's an interesting villain, and the major issue is he's not given enough time. Like there are scenes there that work, but it just
again, which you could have given him if you had just saved the cheetah bit for a post-credit scene, or maybe the beginning of Wonder Woman 3.
Yeah,
and just kind of Easter egged her in as like comic relief. Basically what you should have done with Cheetah, and what I think they kind of tried to do with Cheetah, but it wasn't done very well, was make her an evil version or a becoming evil version of Etta Candy. Make her Diana's BFF, so we can see. Basically, you make her for Wonder Woman what Kat Dennings' character was in the Thor movies, and then you have her turn slowly into a badass and have it be kind of comedic relief, and then later on, either at the very end of the movie or in the very beginning of the third one, you can have the power slowly corrupt her, because of course that's the nature of the Dreamstone.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it's just like the greatest. Okay, the positives I have for this as like a writer and a amateur director is it's shot well. Like it looks good.
Yeah. The CG sometimes bollockses it up, but
I'm not too big on that because I've been watching Marvel movies for a decade, so
yeah, guys, dear entirety of Hollywood, CG is advanced enough now that you shouldn't need to settle for the quasi crap CG. You can do better, and CG is cheaper now than it has ever been to do. So don't give me any excuses. You can take the 5 extra minutes to do another render and then work out some of the kinks.
Oh no, for all that stuff, it takes months.
Well,
it's a lot of complicated shit, dude.
Well, to do the original design, sure, but it really doesn't take that long to do another render over top of things.
To make it as realistic as possible to where you don't even know you're watching CGI, kind of does. But
well, yeah, but what I'm talking about is the CGI glitches, like when things look rubbery and stuff, or when frames are missing, and that kind of stuff.
That's fair, but yeah, no,
it doesn't have to look 100% like it's a physical object sitting there, but at the very least, it can avoid looking, like a Looney Tunes sketch.
Yeah, but either way, yeah, it's shot well. I like the score, and I remember people bringing up the issue of them not having 80s music in it. 80s movies don't have 80s music in it.
Yeah, and also, I'm of two minds on the whole 80s thing, because I do think it could have leaned into the 80s-ness a bit more, and that might have helped for like stylistic purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, not every 80s movie was 100% balls to the wall, turn it up to 1180s all the time. So
yeah.
Not every movie is Teen Witch, which is probably the most 80s of 80s movies I've ever seen.
Yeah. But my thing with Um, yeah, I prefer scores, musical scores and stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, granted, I listen to music as well. I don't know. For movies, I prefer a really iconic score, in which the main issue I have with that is like with Hollywood in general is they aren't willing to like
They
they
don't really make iconic scores anymore, and
yeah
it annoys the shit out of me as well. Like here's the thing: a good score should be something that, number one, you're humming after the movie is over, or possibly during the movie, and you can immediately identify what um what and who a character is based on the score. Like for example, here's an example of a really good score. Pirates of the Caribbean. You start playing the Pirates of the Caribbean theme. Every motherfucker in the world who has ever seen those movies knows what you're referencing. Or the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies. You start playing that theme, and everyone who's seen those movies knows what you're referencing.
I need to
But
watch those movies again.
Hmm?
I might need to watch those movies again.
The Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies.
Yep.
Honestly, now that RDJ is not busy Iron Manning it up anymore, I
Mhm.
want a third one of those.
Yeah. But what else? So I'm not entirely like again like I don't really care that this movie just because it's set in the '80s doesn't mean it has to play '80s songs or anything.
Right.
I think the score is fine. I wish it was a little more um, uh, epic. I mean, like it's fine. Like it has that kind of synth wave feel to it, which again I think makes sense for the time setting.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish there was more of a bombastic nature to certain scenes
Yeah.
with the score.
Themes should be iconic. And as much as I loathe the Harry Potter franchise, that is one thing the Potter franchise did well. Even though what basically all they did was take a song from Swan Lake and do a key change of it.
Right. So the thing with Cheetah, I wanted to bring this up. I can't think of a natural way because you already brought her up, but I was still talking about Max. Uh,
Mhm.
the thing about Cheetah is I like what they were doing with that character, and like the scene where she attacks the guy who previously like kind of attacked her
Yeah.
is good. Like it shows the difference between her and Diana when they're given that kind of power.
Yeah, it's Catwoman done right, basically, is what
And
Cheetah's subplot was.
yeah, and the scene where she talks with like that homeless guy. Oh, again, like before the whole attempted rape scene, I guess.
Yeah.
Which kudos for you, Frank. Kudos to uh, uh, director's name,
Patty Jenkins.
Patty Jenkins. I don't know why I was thinking Caddy. But yeah, Patty Jenkins. Kudos to. I mean, it was implied; it wasn't downright stated, but um, the homeless guy. I I honestly would have wanted to see more interactions between them, and like I think it would have made the impact of her scaring him off with her power
Hmm.
after she like violently beat up the guy who attacked her earlier
Yeah.
would have felt more impactful.
Hmm.
And again, like the major issue is there are certain things that weren't given enough time.
Yeah.
They were kind of just sped through, which I think is kind of the downfall of this movie.
Yeah. That and the poor editing, because subplots are just kind of thrown together and they don't really
Yeah, there aren't.
cohere into cohesive
Yeah.
thing.
Um. Another thing was there wasn't enough time to get emotionally invested with anything. Like even if I had seen the previous movie and known stuff, like with Steve and Trevor's relationship,
Hmm.
I felt nothing in this movie. Like I felt like I almost teared up in watching Wonder Woman when Steve died. Spoilers, by the way, I guess. You haven't seen that movie?
Well, I think this movie is set in the 80s, and that movie is set in the 1910s because World War One. So uh, you probably, even if he hadn't have died in the first one, you'd probably be assuming he was dead anyway.
Yeah, but my question, my point is, it goes too fast to the point that you can't make proper emotional connect.
Nothing registers.
Yeah, like I'm just blank face, like through most of it.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel bad that for the movie because there is something there. There is a heart. There's a soul. There's skeleton
Yeah,
and stuff. I think it's missing. It's
yeah,
missing something, but I'm not even entirely sure what it is.
yeah.
That's the problem.
Which is where we get into what I think is the most indicative problem of the movie. I think Patty Jenkins caught a little bit of George Lucas syndrome. Um, in the sense of because she was so successful with the first movie, um, no one was willing to tell her no or put any kind of restrictions on her. Um, and that was kind of the downfall of the movie because I admit that even I made this mistake a while ago when I said um, that Alan Heinberg didn't matter because it was Patty Jenkins' baby and he didn't really contribute anything. Like I remember saying that, and I'm pretty sure I even said it on air before.
Yeah, you
Um,
never.
but if Wonder Woman 1984 shows us anything, and this is kind of a bittersweet situation, it's that Alan Heinberg did quite a lot to give Wonder Woman 1 its structure and its heart because he was the guy who came up with the idea of treating Diana like a Disney princess. Um, which I say that's bittersweet because if this is what Patty Jenkins is like off the leash, if this is what she's like without any kind of restrictions on her, then that means that um, Netflix's adaptation of The Sandman is in very good hands because the same writer who did Wonder Woman is going to be the showrunner in the Sandman series. So selfishly, I'm optimistic for that, but sadly, it means that someone got it in their heads that we shouldn't tell Patty Jenkins no ever, and that is wrong.
Yeah. Um, I just want to say there are no real. Well, you could say with Max Lord, maybe, but there's no real definitive conclusion for a lot of characters, specifically the villains.
Yeah, Cheetah just kind of slinks off, presumably didn't cash in or didn't redeem her wish. Therefore, she still has her powers.
No, she did.
And me,
She did.
did she renege on her wish?
Yeah.
Okay, so if she's if she's going to come back, she needs to get her powers back somehow.
Mhm.
Then I didn't see her renege on her wish. Therefore, I had assumed she kept her powers, but apparently not.
Which I think
Um,
is interesting.
the whole subplot with Steve coming back and Diana having to sacrifice him again is kind of treated like just kind of, this is what I had to do.
Well, no,
Like,
the major issue is again like the pacing. I don't think we really spent that much time with them to really get the sense of it.
mm-hmm.
That weight, because let's be honest, that is a very big choice. And like she even says, this is the one thing that she selfishly wants earlier in the movie. Like
Yeah,
Steve himself is saying that you gotta let go.
yeah. But it's almost Wonder Woman's equivalent to One More Day there for a minute.
Right.
Like she so much wants this loved one back that she's willing to let the whole universe hang, basically.
Yes, and I should feel something like that. That should have such emotional weight.
But
The main
we've got an action scene and a third act to do, so Diana's just kind of gotta suck it up and do her thing.
again, like I don't like I'm sure it works on its own, like that scene, but because we don't have we haven't spent enough time with these characters in
Mm-hmm.
this setting and time frame and movie,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel anything, and I regret that because I know I should and I want to, but I can't.
Yeah, it's not set up. It's not there.
Like, say what you want about the Sam Raimi films, and I know they're not perfect, but
Yeah, they're very much a product of their time.
I still enjoy them for what they are. But
they're as good as a comic book movie could have been at the time, but it has been 20 years.
okay, but hear me out. They still had they took their time, even though they weren't like super long movies or anything. They took their time to let things air out and build rapport with the characters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you would feel things in certain situations, like with Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2 when he sacrificed himself.
Yeah.
Like you spent like I don't know, like 40 minutes in the in the in the in the beginning of the movie before he becomes Doc Ock. Like he has a wife and stuff, and again, like it's just like
Side note: the prosthetics for his arms in Spider-Man 2 are amazing.
oh yeah, yeah, and a perfect blend of CGI too. Like that is how you fucking do CGI and practical effects, motherfuckers.
Yeah, yeah. It still holds up after 18 motherfucking years plus.
But
So
but that's besides the point. I just yeah, again, like I think there there should have been scenes that were cut down or trimmed, and scenes that should have been added to. And I feel like there was a lot of deleted material. Like I'm getting that feeling.
uh-huh. Which ironically might be yet another case of Warner Brothers getting in their own fucking way.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna crap on Warner Brothers too badly here, because Fox did the exact same shit when they had the X-Men,
Hmm.
which is also which again is why the one Fox X-Men movie that did unambiguously well is Deadpool, because the powers that be thought it was going to fail inevitably, so they just were like, "Here, take $50 million for this bomb of yours," and then it didn't bomb because the people who made it actually gave a damn.
Hmm.
Um, and then of course and then Warner Brothers had their version of that with Joker. So in short, movie studios in general, get out of your own way and let
Right.
let the IPs be what they are.
There
Please.
are two things I should mention. We kind of covered them, but we didn't we didn't go too depth in them. The
Hmm.
opening scene with the Amazon Olympics,
Hmm.
like that's the first thing we should cover.
Yeah.
They make no fucking sense. Why the fuck are they in this movie? I get. I feel
It's to set up the apparent like lesson or moral of the movie of like um
but
cheating
how is it?
has negative consequences, and
I don't.
basically it was what Tolkien said when he said shortcuts make for long delays.
I don't know. Like I see it as more fighting smarter than fighting harder. Like she
Yeah,
used ingenuity to use the aqueduct
yeah,
to
but
pass.
the lesson they were trying to beat into your head was cheating is never the proper way to accomplish
Okay,
anything, and cheating also
that I don't
always has negative consequences.
that I don't disagree with, but
Yeah,
I think the mistake with that the young Diana was she didn't hit the mark. If she was able to like throw something at it, burst it, that would have.
yeah, yeah. What she did should have probably been interpreted as ingenuity more than cheating. Um, because ingenuity and strategy are a part of games and warfare as well.
Yeah.
And you would think for a warrior culture, which the Amazons are, they would be they would insist on training the mind as hard as they insist on training the body.
Yeah.
One
So
would think.
that's my main issue, is that it doesn't make sense with
Yeah.
that. I get what they were trying to do, but
Yeah. Like non-diegetically, the reason is to hammer in the cheating is always a bad thing message, but diegetically, that lesson really doesn't flow from that scene.
I think, okay, I get, again, like, she didn't hit the mark to, obviously, but she still was smart enough to be able to get ahead of her opponents.
Yeah.
But
Which
without,
again, for a warrior culture,
yeah,
um,
but without, like, violently attacking them or sabotaging them.
yeah.
She was still honorable in that way. But that's, again, like, that could be a whole discussion itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one, the greatest Amazon warrior. I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but you know the
But
one.
the Linda Carter,
Yeah,
basically.
if you don't know, they brought in Linda Carter as kind of like an Easter egg, and there is kind of an issue I have with that. Unfortunately, is that it's not tied to anything.
Yeah. I think they could fix this in the third movie if that warrior and Diana end up having to team up, and then we can have both Wonder Woman tag teaming some motherfuckers in the
Yeah,
movie,
yeah,
and that'll be worth everything.
that would be fine, but I think it's unnecessary in this one. Is
Yeah.
like, and there's nothing against Linda Carter. Like, legitimately, I thought about casting Linda Carter for Wonder Woman in my Justice League rewrite pitch video I did like a year ago.
I would have thought that the thing that would have made the most sense is cast her as Hippolyta,
Yeah,
and
same.
then it's one Wonder Woman passing the legacy on to the next kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's just like, in this movie, in terms of the story and stuff, it makes no sense. Along with her golden armor is the thing. Like, it has no real thematic reason to actually be in here, unless it's just fan service to Kingdom Come.
Yeah, I think it would have made more sense if it was a stylized version of her armor from the TV show, and then it would have been a nice continuation.
Yeah. Um, I mean, again, nothing against Linda Carter. Like, she was the first ever live action Wonder Woman, and her
Uh-huh.
legacy will stand forever. But
Yeah.
in terms of this movie, it just made no sense to have her in it,
Yeah.
unless, like, if you brought her in to be a major player, like as a side character or side protagonist,
Yeah.
that's fine. But
She left us waiting to call back to the old Wonder Woman theme. All the world is waiting for you and the power you possess. Well, you kept us waiting, Linda.
yeah,
And that's
so,
not your fault. That's the writer's fault for not using you effectively, but still.
yeah, like Supergirl used her better, Linda Carter better, as making her like the president of the United States.
You're right. I completely forgot they did that. That was a nice touch.
I mean, they made her like an alien.
Right, but still. Um
But they,
one does not simply waste Linda Carter
yeah,
as Sean Bean's character from Lord of the Rings would say, whose name I can't remember at the moment.
Boromir.
Thank you.
I haven't watched Lord of the Rings since I was like single digits.
I always forget Boromir because he always annoyed me, and he only exists in the first one. So I'm just like, I'm glad this character who I don't like is dead now.
Fair enough. But yeah, overall, yeah, Wonder Woman 1984 is, it's not bad, it's not good, it's okay. I think it could have been worked on better. Please get someone who can uh, bounce ideas off with Patty Jenkins.
Yes.
Yeah, Patty Jenkins, and be able to rein her in.
Yeah.
Uh,
She needs somebody who not necessarily can make her movie more serious, but can jive with her ideas and plus them, to borrow a Disney phrasing.
yeah,
Because that's what I believe it was Alan Feinberg in the first Wonder Woman movie did. With
Yeah.
he took the basic idea that Patty was going for and he plussed it.
Yeah. Ooh. Sorry. Yeah, just needs it just needed a tighter structure and it would have been good.
Yeah, there's a phrase that Brainstormer and I often use that I call publishing the rough draft. And that very much appears to be the case here. Is somebody just didn't bother to do a second draft?
Yeah. Which is unfortunate because I think there is a movie here. It's just kind of bogged down by too many ideas.
Yeah, there are like 2.5 movies here. They're just all fighting for attention.
Yeah. But yeah, like I would say go watch this movie, but I wouldn't like expect as good as the first.
Yeah, don't expect as good as the first one. But basically, it's better than all of the Snyderverse, but it's not as good as Aquaman, Shazam, the first Wonder Woman, or Joker.
You know, a part of me thinks maybe we should do a watch party where we watch the Snyderverse movies.
That might be interesting. Yes.
Yeah, someday.
Hmm.
We still got Cora.
We do.
Fuck. Anyway,
God.
anyway, folks. With that, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Fuck off.